VocalEye Almost Live Zoom, My Mother's Story, hosted by Amy Amantea, with special guests Marilyn Norry, Cheryl Green, Kerry Kijewski, Mulholland, Rebecca Singh, Nancy Gill, Anne Mock, Rita Dilek, and Kristy Kassie.
So welcome to this VocalEye Almost Live event. My name is Amy Amantea, my pronouns are she, her, and I'm the Associate Director for VocalEye. I'm your host for these Almost Live events, and I'm a member of the blind community. And as always, I'd like to extend a big thank you to those who have supported us from the time we started these Almost Lives, but it's been really nice to have the support. So some folks have made financial contributions, and a big thank you for those. And other folks are writing us the most lovely testimonials, and thank you so much for those. If you have capacity to write testimonials or to perhaps make a financial donation, because all of our programming is offered free of charge, please feel free to find that information on our website, or it'll be posted in the chat function as well. But is also circulated in our newsletters, and folks can ask me at any time if they have questions. If you happen to be watching this event on our YouTube channel, there's a couple things that you can do to support us. There's a little button called like and a little button called subscribe. If you want to click on those buttons, we would be ever so grateful. VocalEye is broadcasting to you from the traditional and stolen lands of the Coast Salish peoples, in particular the Squamish, the Musqueam, and the Tsleil-Waututh First Nations. Tonight, as we're going to be connecting through stories of our mothers and grandmothers, I thought I would do a little bit of research about some Indigenous folks and how they viewed motherhood in community. So here's some things I'd like to share that I learned. The Native American way of life understands the whole world as sacred. Family is sacred, the earth is sacred, and all of life has meaning in the interconnected sacred loop. And in this circle of unity, women are revered as beautiful and powerful because they are the givers of sacred life. They are grounded in Mother Earth and connected to Father Sky, bringing children into the world through the power of their life-giving love. Like Mother Earth, who provides everything we need to live and to thrive, the woman is able to give everything a human child needs to live and thrive. She nourishes, she loves, and she protects. Without women, there is no hope, no future, no carrying on of tradition, and no carrying on of culture. This is why Native American culture has always honored and respected women, elevating them to positions of reverence and honor in their tribes. Mothers and grandmothers raise the children, teaching them how to live life honorably, with respect, and respect for elders and others in the community and their traditions. So I thought I would share a little bit of that with you. I thought that was a lovely sentiment, given that we are all connecting around our mothers and grandmothers in this evening's presentation. So thank you for that. So it's a big welcome to you all on this Wednesday, May the 17th, 2023. And tonight we're proud to offer you our Almost Live event number 121. I said it, 121. This one is entitled My Mother's Story. And to kick off the event, we're going to bring in Marilyn Norry into the space. Welcome, Marilyn.
Hello.
Hello.
I have a frog in my voice today, but other times I feel quite wonderful. I sound wonderful, but tonight I apologize.
I'm going to say, because you just came back from France, I'm going to make a connection.
Yeah,
you picked up a frog in France.
Oh,
It's very French. It's very French.
I haven't heard that one. That's ridiculous. Okay, that's wonderful. Okay.
I aim to please, Marilyn. I aim to please. So this idea of the mother's story is your baby. This is your baby.
Yeah, it's been my baby for a long time. It's amazing. 2004. I'm an actor. I also work as a dramaturg and a story editor with playwrights and people who write movies, and just telling them what they've written and how to make it better. And but I was really tired in 2004 with the way that women were being portrayed and the scripts and what I was seeing on stage. And I just thought, oh my God, there's got to be something more and better than this. It just seemed very dull. And I was at a wedding, and a friend said to me, well, you have to know my mother's story. And she told me her mother's story, just the fact she was born here, and then this happened. Her parents were like that. They moved here, then this happened. And she did it about 15 minutes. And I thought, oh my God, that's a character arc. That's what we use in dramatic writing. We just say the character started here, went through all of this, and ended up here. And I thought, I wonder if I could do that with my mother's story. And I never told stories about my mom at all, except, to complain. So I had to start and say, well, she was born here, and then this happened, and thinking about the story arc. What would be the next thing that in the movie of my mother, what would happen next? And then I sent it out to my friends who were women actors in Vancouver, and they wrote their mother's story, and that was amazing. And I'm really glad we did this last year with the VocalEye, just getting people to write the facts of their mother's lives. And it's just an amazing process.
So, Marilyn, why do you think that I know you touched on about with this idea of like women being portrayed as rather dull, but I think there's a bigger importance to what you're doing here. Maybe why do you think it's so important that we document these things?
Well, I was initially thinking about women's history that had not been told. I think we also do not value the stories that we grew up with. We tend to think, oh, that's, that's the same as everybody. Or to think that's the same as nobody. Nobody's going to believe that. We never write them down, these stories. But what I have discovered, or what we have all discovered during this process, is there's an awful lot of healing that happens when people just write down the stories by which they come together, how they grew up, what was happening in their families, and everyone's surprised.
Okay, so you started off by telling us that we did this last year with VocalEye, so we had a little workshop last year of a couple of folks, but we weren't quite ready. So what did we do to prepare for tonight's event?
We've had 4 workshops with people who just signed up. They wanted to do this. We all the stories written for my mother's story follow the same recipe, which is just the facts of your mother's life from beginning to end, where you are just a footnote. And it's in 2,000 words. Of course, anybody can write a story any way that they want, but using this recipe allows people to discover the stuff that they don't know. And it's to see your mother as a human being like yourself, rather than someone with whom you have grievances or whatever it is. It's not about your relationship. It's not about whether she was a good or bad mother. It's not about your opinion at all. It's just the facts of her story. So we've worked for over 4 workshops, and we've got 7 people are reading their stories or having someone else read their story tonight. And this is so exciting.
I think it's really lovely. And I think when we are asked to write our mother's story, initially, many folks might say, well, I'm not a writer. I can't do that, right? But this idea of writing down the facts means that you're not asked to be a creative writer. Yes. You're just asked to document the history. What happens if somebody doesn't know the history? What do we do then?
It doesn't matter if you think you know everything or you think you know nothing. You'll be surprised. And it is true. You don't need to be a writer. You just write how you talk. It's about telling stories. That's what we're doing. And what you do is you just write everything you know. And you put it in order from her birth until, the present day or when she passed away. And you just write it all down. And then you look at it and you say, well, actually, I know more than I thought. Or I know there's things that I don't know. This is amazing. Then you've got your document. Then you go out and ask questions of your family. You can find the records of things that are all online, or you go on Facebook and you find your old neighbors on Facebook and ask them questions. And, it's a really great assignment. Anyone can do this.
So you can go as deep as you want to.
Absolutely.
Or not.
Yeah. And you can go to a hospital and say, I want the medical records of my mother. And people have done that.
So you've had people do that who have written their stories before with you?
Yeah. I've worked with over 200 people on this. And it just thrills me every time, every single story. And these ones that we have tonight are just as thrilling as any other night that we have. These people, you think you know one another because we're all in the same group or something. And then you find out, oh no, my mom grew up in Istanbul or China or Trinidad or Punjab. We know these things and we don't know them. Mm-hmm. We are all different. We are all following our own path. Now, the stories tonight we're going to hear is the mother had some relationship with having a child who lost their sight. Now, there's a couple stories where the person the writer didn't lose their sight until after their mom had passed away. Mm-hmm. So the mom didn't even know about that. But this is those kinds of tangential connections that we have with one another. And they're very, very different stories, and they're very familiar stories as well.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the nice thing about this project is because we're all human beings, we will hear things in other people telling their mother or their grandmother's story that we go, that really resonates with me because I had a mother or a grandmother that was like that. Or so I think as human beings we can empathize and resonate with what we're going to hear tonight. Marilyn, from a broader perspective of the project My Mother's Story, what do you do with all these stories when they're written?
We do have an archive online at mymothersstory.org, and anyone can submit their story to that following that writing recipe. And you don't have to do that. You can just write the story for yourself, for your family, whatever. But of course, we really love it if you could give us the story. And what I would like to do with VocalEye and this larger community as well is to have a portion of our archive as an audio archive where people, because we will see this tonight, and this is not just necessarily for the blind community. These are the most intimate stories that you'll ever hear. And they're very profound, just listening to a child tell the story of their mother. And there's great impact there. And so that's what I hope to do, is to build that audio archive.
I think that's a lovely idea. Yeah, you hate to say it out loud, but the truth is that as children, we're probably selfish to a certain extent, where we don't really think about our mothers as people before we were born. Right? Like, we've only known our mother for as long as we were on this earth. And so who was our mother before we even got here? I know that I'm working on my story, so it won't be shared tonight. But it has prompted me to ask my mother all sorts of questions and learn all sorts of things about her. And then the process becomes, okay, I'm going to document it all. And then I'm going to decide what is too much and what is not enough, and all of those pieces, right?
And that's the process that we went through in the workshops. Everybody came in with the story, and then they got the courage up and told them, and then trying to figure out, it's a great opportunity to edit and learn a lot of good writing practices with this material that you think you know, but how do you tell it? Just that whole kind of process is a great writing exercise.
Yeah, and my ambition is that once I'm done with my mother's story, I will write my grandmother's story. And my grandmother passed just last year, so I'm curious about picking my brain about her mother. Because I'm starting to learn more and more about their relationship just by talking to my mother about her childhood with her mother, right? So this thing could go very far back. If you wanted to write the generations of the women in your family, there's really no end to it. You go knock on the door of the Ancestry.com or the 23andMe or whoever and start finding people that you have DNA connections with. Hey, did you know somebody in my family?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. There's great stories there.
Marilyn, is there anything that you would like to say to our writers before we jump into tonight's content?
No, but I'm very, except that I am very excited that they are taking the leap of doing this and reading their stories out loud. And don't be afraid. There's people who need to hear your story. So
And yeah,
take
maybe it
that.
prompts other people to check out your website and to write a story of their
Yeah,
own.
yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, friends. Well, I think we're going to transition into tonight's I was going to call it meat and potatoes, but that's not fair to my vegetarian and vegan friends. But tonight's nuts and bolts, the core content that we're all here to share with each other. So, I think our first story is going to be by Kaye Leslie, but Kaye's not able to join us, so I'm going to invite Cheryl Green into the space. And Cheryl is a describer friend of VocalEye, joining us from the US of A. Cheryl, say hello.
Hello, thank you for having me.
It's so nice to have you. Can you just give us a little couple of sentences about who is Cheryl Green?
Sure. I am a white Ashkenazi Jewish woman with a poof of dark curly hair on my head and big old black glasses. And I am in Portland, Oregon, so the land of the Multnomah, Clackamas, Cathlemet, and many other bands and tribes. And I've been an audio describer for about 6 years, I think. Yeah.
Is that all?
I think so.
Wow, that's incredible because when I think of you, I think about somebody who's been an audio describer like since description began because you're just so great at it.
Oh,
So in my
actually, I
mind, I'm
think
like,
it's fine. Anyway, I don't know how long I've been doing it, but thank you. I like, yes. And I definitely look like I've been describing for 50 years. I definitely have a mature
well,
look.
I didn't mean it that way, but
No, I'm kidding. Most people think I'm about 20, but I am more than twice that. So
well, there you go. I guess that means you're aging well, Cheryl. I love that. So you're going to read a story tonight by Kaye, who isn't able to join us. Is there anything that you'd like to share with us before I just give you the stage to read the story?
Nope, I'm just delighted to be here, and thank you for the opportunity to read the story.
Wonderful. All right, I'm going to say goodbye, and we're going to listen to this Kaye Leslie's story of her mother.
My Mother's Story, May 13, 2022, by Kaye Leslie. Mary Alice Laverne Bell was born in Owen Sound, Ontario, on a lovely fall day on September 1st, 1912. My mom was born on her mom's birthday, and her birth took place at Mary Bell and her husband T.D. Bell's home. My mom lived with her parents in Owen Sound, where she spent the summers at a camp and used to paddle on a log with her little brother Ivan on Georgian Bay. Mom was one of 5 siblings, and her oldest sister was Dorothy. Her oldest brother was Bernie, followed by Ivan, and then the baby who was named Andy. Mom lived through the Depression and World War II and remembers a time when houses had cards placed on their doors indicating a specific type of infection. A yellow card indicated diphtheria, a blue card meant polio, and a red card on the door advised people not to go in as scarlet fever was prevalent among the family members. The baker would leave bread and other goods at the door and leave. This is not unlike what is happening currently with our COVID pandemic. So my mom became very resilient and learned a great deal about rations and doing without much sugar and limited flour or meat. My mom's parents later owned a small grocery store, and mom recalled great wheels of cheese and big barrels of pickles and other luxuries. Because everyone was in the same position with very little money, my grandfather, T.D. Bell, would extend credit to many customers, which often left their family in a difficult position. My mom was a good student and really enjoyed school, although she left after grade 10, which was very common in order to work and help out the family. My mom took violin lessons and said that she was terrible, but she always appreciated the opportunity to take lessons anyway. I recall hearing the story that surrounded how my mom and dad met. It was a social function, perhaps a dance, and my mom said that she loved the way my dad laughed. He was always a great storyteller and entertained people very well. They first lived with my dad's mother until they raised enough money to purchase their first home. Again, I remember my mom explaining that because there were rations and not much money to spare. They had to decide whether to go to a movie or to put that money into a gallon of gas and go for a drive. We have many photos of mom and dad in the early days of their marriage. They always appeared to have very sporty clothes, even bathing suits, and Dad always had a nice car. My mom wore her hair in a bob, and she loved to dance and could demonstrate to us how she could still do the Charleston. My brother Don was born on June 30th, 1945. My dad, in the meantime, left to work as a radar technician and instructor during the war. He was gone from 1940 until 1945 when the war ended. My mom was living with her son, Ted, in the home of her parents. She worked in the general store and also pumped gas in order to help out. Because there was no internet in those days, Mom and Dad would write letters using every inch of space in order to fit the most content onto the airmail pages that was possible. It could take weeks or indeed months to receive a letter. During this time, my mom was not sure of the exact location of my dad, and at least on one occasion, my dad was reported missing in action. My mom missed him dearly and kept all of his letters from those years. My dad was in India, Sumatra, and finally the UK and Scotland. When he returned in 1945, Ted was 10 years old and hardly knew my father. This was a very hard time for Ted, and my mom also had to adjust to a husband who now had a British accent and suffered some post-traumatic stress due to the horrors that he was exposed to during the war. Dad would talk about the big snakes, the red ants, and termites around their tents. However, he was very reluctant to talk about the war. We did see a scar on his leg that was a result of shrapnel, but we did not fully understand what that meant. Joan and I, twins, were born on February 24th in 1951. By this time, we were living in a small town in southwestern Ontario called Walkerton. My dad was now a hydro inspector and would travel from town to town inspecting wiring and often barns where he would be met by a cross dog or goat. When Joan and I were about 4 years old, we moved only about 5 miles away to a small German town called Neustadt. Here we lived in a beautiful big brick home. It was a very big kitchen with tile floors, a big sun porch with surrounding windows, a very pretty dining room with wine-colored walls and carpet, and a big living room, which was reserved for guests and the Christmas tree. There was a vestibule with a slate floor and a big mirror on the closet door. The front door was yellow, and there was a den on the left. This was where we watched Bonanza and Ed Sullivan and Gunsmoke. We were one of the few families at that time who had a television. My dad could fix them, so this made it possible to buy second-hand televisions. Upstairs, there were 4 lovely bedrooms, a bathroom with a bathtub and a shower. This was not that common at that time in this small village. Because we were on a well system and had to preserve water, we often had to bathe after our older brother Don by adding more hot water, and this did not please us at all. We also had to limit the amount of water we used. The first time we stayed overnight in a motel, we had the joy of filling the tub right up to the top. In spite of my limited vision, Joan and I did everything, and I did not think much about it. We rode our bikes, roller skated, climbed trees, played kick the can with other kids, and in the summers we would swim, water ski, and go for picnics in a little boat down the lake. We had a great time during these summers at the cottage that our dad built. We ate watermelon, drank Kool-Aid, had fires outside where we roasted hot dogs and marshmallows, and read Nancy Drew books on rainy days. Our mom was very good at making pots of chili or sloppy joes, which could be spread out if company suddenly arrived for dinner. Mom was very welcoming to everyone and loved to see people having fun. The last year of grade 8, someone came to the door of our classroom in June. We sensed that it was something serious. Our dad had been taken to a hospital in London, Ontario, because he had something wrong. We learned later that it was a stroke, and he had already suffered a heart attack not long after returning from the war. Our teacher, Mr. Black, bent over in the hallway and said that we should go home because our father had died, and that Connie, a good friend of my parents, would be there to look after us until our mom came home. I will never forget that day. It seemed impossible that our dad was gone. We could not see the pleasure of his face and comments on our report cards. We would not go to the beloved cottage at the end of June. Mom took it very hard. She was grieving so much that she was not eating, and of course was crying a great deal. She, of course, never expected to be left on her own at age 52. Dad could do everything, and the family revolved around him. One morning, Joan and I were getting ready to go to high school. This new school was very frightening to me as I could not see well and did not have the comfort of my sister being in my class. I used to get lost, and when I had trouble opening my locker, I would be in trouble for being late for class. Joan and I were getting ready for school in the morning, and we heard a crash in the bathroom. Our mom had fainted. We wanted to call a doctor, but she insisted that she would be okay and that we needed to go to school. I remember shaking most of that day. I recall sitting in my typing class and thinking that soon I would be an orphan if our mom died too. My mom finally went to a doctor, and being a very astute Irish family, Dr. Patty O'Toole advised our mom that she had to get out of the house and start living again. So he managed to help my mom get a job at the Walkerton Hospital. There, she worked as a switchboard operator. She worked her way up after a year or two to become in charge of outpatient accounts. She worked hard and would not leave until her books were balanced. Soon, Joan and I were turning 16 years old, and our mom had a lovely birthday party for us. We were able to invite a few friends, and I remember the decorations and birthday cake and a nice dinner with blue candles. I think this was when I knew that my mom was beginning to come around and could play an active role with her children again. So I went off to college, and my brother Don was in university, and Mom then moved to the cottage. She sold the house in Neustadt and had the cottage winterized. It was the perfect size for Mom. It still had a loft bedroom and fireplace and a big picture window that overlooked the lake. When Mom retired at age 65 years old, I think she went through a rough patch. We were all gone. My sister Joan was married and lived in Deep River with her husband. Our grandparents passed away, and I think Mom was lonely. She started to drink more, which became evident during phone calls. We would come home as often as possible, but this situation continued during my mom's 70s. Then when her vision declined, she had to give up driving, and we wondered if she would continue to live at the cottage. She did, and would take a cab to get special groceries and so on. Mom once again showed her resilience by knitting beautiful sweaters for us and for grandchildren. Mom loved to garden and would putter for hours on her flower beds. Mom became very independent and would change her own fuses and attempt small repair projects. She refinished furniture and always had a hobby on the go, including tracing our family history. Mom was an avid reader, and she always loved receiving new books. She always put her name in them and was pretty careful about the person who would be trusted to borrow a book and return it. Then in her mid-70s, Mom's vision began to deteriorate. At first, we were hopeful that it was just cataracts. It became apparent, however, after her cataract surgery, that the problem was age-related macular degeneration. I used to bring an audiobook home that I knew Mom would find interesting, and we would often listen to it together. When I tried to encourage her to get the reading machine, she calmly stated that she appreciated the offer, but it was just not the same as reading a book in print. Finally, when Mom got older, she had a home care worker. She had severe arthritis and was often in pain. In spite of this, she continued to make great dinners, welcomed our friends and guests, and kept knitting and watching the lake and the birds. It did not matter what age people were. It seemed that all generations wanted to come and talk with Mom. Looking back, I think that she was a great listener. She did not judge and had a lot of common sense. When, for example, if I asked if I could bring some friends home for the weekend, she always said, of course. It did not faze her at all when she learned that some friends were gay. She seemed to have a great capacity to accept people on their own terms. I know that other friends of mine would often visit her over tea and tell her their problems or just want some advice. Mom would never disclose the nature of these conversations to us. At various times of her life, my brother Don announced that he and his wife were moving to Australia for a few years. Then years later, my sister Joan told Mom that they had accepted jobs in Singapore, and they stayed there for 7 years. My eldest brother Ted and his wife also spent 3 years in Africa, and then a year in St. Vincent working as retired Canadians who could assist with hydro projects, and Karen worked with teachers to assist with school programs. My mom always encouraged us to take on new adventures and never asked anyone to stay at home and be closer to her. She was very unselfish and never made anyone feel guilty for spreading their wings. She seemed to accept death and loss as she aged. She was beginning to lose friends and siblings, and she accepted this as just part of life. We sent Mom to the UK for her 75th birthday, and that would be her last big trip. We went to England and Scotland with her during her 80s, and then she was content to just sit and watch the birds and watch a bit of TV. Mom became more frail and passed away on September 3rd in 2003. I was living in Toronto at this time, and since I had been visiting her at the cottage every 2 or 3 weekends, it was a big blow to me. I was on my own and without my own family, and missed her terribly. We have so many fond memories of Mom. I recall her red and white Studebaker and her fabulous hot cross buns and special dinners. Mostly, I think I remember how open and welcoming Mom was to all of our friends. She welcomed kids and dogs and never judged according to anyone's life path. She had a very difficult year or two after our dad died, but once she started to work at the hospital, she seemed to find her way and became very independent. Mom was very warm and caring, and she always had homemade soup and oatmeal cookies ready when we would land in for a visit. I hope that I can be like her as I age.
Thank you, Cheryl. That was very lovely to hear you read that story. Since we don't have Kaye with us in the space, any impacts for you as being the reader?
Well, one thing I can't believe I forgot to mention, I am also a twin. And so it was really hard to not break out in a cheer when I was reminded, looking at this again, that she is a twin as well. I don't have this level of closeness with my mom. And so I took great delight in reading about their closeness and how often she visited, and even, the impact that she felt lonely when her mom passed. And I mean, that's not surprising to hear, but it's impactful to hear somebody, just voice it very openly. And it was a beautiful story.
I think so too. Thank you, Cheryl. Well, we're going to say goodbye to you for the moment, but you're going to be back. So I'm going to bring Kerry into the space now. Where's Kerry? Give Kerry a moment to pop up on our screen. Kerry may have to put your camera on so we can spotlight you. There's Kerry.
Hello?
Hello, we can hear you.
Hello.
So, Kerry, before we get into you telling your story, because you're going to read yours this evening, for folks who don't know anything about Kerry, and there might be a few, what do we need to know about you?
Well, I'm here in Ontario, and I am here with my Braille display. So I'm a Braille reader. I was born with low vision, and now I'm closer to nearly totally blind at this point. And I'm a writer and a podcaster, and I really enjoy these VocalEye nights.
That's right. You've been in the audience many times. Shout out to Outlook on Radio Western. Woohoo! It's a great podcast, so check that out. So, Kerry, is there anything you'd like to start by introducing your story, or do you just want to jump in and read it, and then we can chat with you a little bit about it afterwards?
Yeah, I think I'll just speak for myself in the story. Sounds good.
Wonderful. All right, I'm going to give the stage to you, my friend.
Right. Because moms know everything, she'd say when we'd ask why or how do you know? We'd sigh, but inside we believed her. My maternal grandfather once told a story about his little daughter, age 2, creeping down the front steps, pretending to be a baby bird, even though she was told to stay up on the porch. My mother, Janet K. Witzel, was born on October 7th, 1957, to parents Ruby and Melvin, Mennonites whose ancestors came to Canada from Germany in the 1800s. They lived on a dairy farm north of the town of Woodstock in southwest Ontario. Her mother taught her to bake and to sew, and she spent time out at the creek or the bush behind the farm with her brothers or playing with other female cousins nearby. She was an only girl in the middle of 4 boys. Early on in Mom's life, her mother started experiencing symptoms of extreme chronic pain, fatigue, and depression, in bed a lot of the time. Mom left school after 10th grade to get a job because that's what the rest of her family did then. She found work in the fabric department of the local department store in her late teens. Shortly before Christmas, 1975, co-workers convinced a shy young man from another department to ask my mother to the store's holiday dance. In 1977, she flew on an airplane for the first time over to Europe with that young man and his parents to visit their European family in Germany, those they hadn't seen since the end of World War II. Before then, she'd only gone as far as Florida as a girl, where her grandparents always went to escape Canadian winters. She sewed her own dress, and the wedding took place on June 16, 1979. She then became Janet Kijewski. The newlyweds traveled along the East Coast for their honeymoon, having to stop by the side of the road when she experienced morning sickness. Only 2 months after the wedding, she was alone in the new house, the one she'd recently purchased with my dad. There she was, stuck on the opposite side of the city of Woodstock from the rest of her family, as a tornado went through the county, and she was left frantic, wondering if her loved ones were all safe. The edge of the debris path hit my father in his vehicle. It passed right over Mom's family farm, house and barn destroyed. Mom's wedding dress was found sometime later, tangled in a tree on the property. My older brother soon arrived and Mom stayed at home. Her children were born throughout the 1980s, all 4 births C-sections because of a curvature at the bottom of her spine, which made natural labor complicated. Her first 2 children, a boy and a girl, came along with no noticeable issues. Then I was born, and she soon discovered I wasn't tracking with my eyes. She'd already had 2 babies and knew what to watch for in a newborn's development. 3 years after I was born, my younger brother came along, and he, too, wasn't seeing much at all. I was diagnosed with low vision, he with light perception. After having to quit her job following the wedding, policy stating that a married couple couldn't both work in the same store, my mom then had the privilege of time and the freedom to research more about blindness. In those years, a family of 6 could live comfortably from one working parent's salary. She took classes to learn the Braille my younger brother and I would need. She soon memorized the dot combinations and began putting up Braille all over the house to immerse us in the words and the Braille code, including making her own Braille children's books if they were not readily available. She fought school board officials to get her blind children the same education her sighted kids were getting. There every single morning to put her children on the school bus, she was there when we came home. Mom took us into the small village nearby to the little church on Sundays, but figured out how not to push or preach religion. She wore clip-on earrings, as pierced ears weren't a thing in her family. Mom loved spending her days out in her yard. She was proud of her flowers and the rows of strawberries, peas, and carrots, just like her mother's garden. Mom would dig and plant and landscape the flower beds. She showed her love of the natural world by encouraging our curiosity about all of it. Whether it was a pair of abandoned baby squirrels she once attempted to care for, the raccoons in the yard she befriended who used to come to her window and call for her, or all the birds who knew no better than to fly directly into large front windows in the living room. She'd stay with them until they would wake from their stunned state, and she'd then aid them in flying off again. She once brought a dead bee into the house, placing it on a plastic placemat and setting it on the tray under the lens of my CCTV magnifier so I could get a look close up. Somehow, the bee fell into my palm. We found out that day, bees can still sting after they die. She believed up close was best and would place flowers between our fingers so we could feel the velvety petals surrounding us with their fragrance. She always took the time to stop to comment on the pairs of deer by the side of the road, pointing out a couple of turkey vultures in the field out back, or Grandma and her together sharing in the joy of spotting a bird perched on the wash line. Around 1990, my father's occasional headaches became debilitating, and she had to leave us kids with her mother and father so she could be next to her husband during brain surgery for a subdural hematoma. After he recovered, they decided to take us to Disney World. They liked to show us places, and we'd often go away for a day trip or overnight somewhere on holidays. They surprised us with the news one night at dinner that we were going to drive to Florida. I remember looking down at my plate in stunned disbelief, staring at the orange flowers with the black outline, bowled over by the thought of taking such a trip. Surrounded by cows in the fields bordering us, she would call us all to dinner, just a farm girl at heart, each night by ringing the cowbell that hung from the railing on our stairs. In 1996, she started taking German lessons, even though she grew up hearing her parents speaking a dialect of the language already. These lessons were in preparation for returning to Europe with Dad again, but this time with her two oldest children to introduce them to their extended family. She and Dad planned to take us, their two youngest kids, to Germany a few years later to do the same. She found a way to reconnect Dad and us all to his half-sister and other long estranged family here in Canada during those years. Around that time, Mom noticed something wasn't right, begging our family doctor to test her unwell daughter, checking my kidney function, and suddenly I was diagnosed with end-stage chronic kidney failure. As a family, we were all tested, learning the link between the blindness and the kidney problems, a rare genetic syndrome called senior loken. My younger brother was then showing similar signs and symptoms. Their big trip to Europe was all booked when my surprise diagnosis happened, and they almost canceled the whole thing until the pediatric kidney specialist urged them to go anyway because no treatment would begin right away. And so she and my dad took their first-born children as planned and left my younger brother and I back with trusted family and friends. On their return, I started dialysis, Mom being trained by the nurses to administer the treatment for me each night. And in 1997, she sat for hours in a surgical waiting room while the surgeons removed my father's kidney and brought it over to be transplanted into my abdomen. A year after that, we made it to Germany. Then in 1999, it was my brother's transplant turn, her turn to be the live donor. Later that year, she went back to work after being home since the start of her marriage. After being married 20 years, my father went through a sudden career transition. With no high school education, not having worked in decades, she decided to draw on all the medical training and all the years raising children with a disability before that, and she got a job as a personal support worker in a group home. A cousin from each side of my family would die of suicide, first in 2004 and then in 2011. She comforted her mother-in-law when breaking the news, and then she was there to support her youngest brother after he lost his oldest son. At the end of July 2005, Mom lost her mother unexpectedly. Her dad died on Valentine's Day 5 years later to follow Grandma, which left Mom without living parents. As mother of the bride, Mom held my sister's wedding in the backyard amongst the flowers. At the start of 2010, she lost her father, and by the end of that year, on New Year's Eve, Mom's first grandchild was born, followed by 3 more. Mom was eventually diagnosed with type 2 diabetes after years and years, whether due to being pregnant 4 times or from finding comfort in salty snacks to manage stress. In June 2019, she and my father went on a tour of England, Ireland, and Scotland to celebrate their 40th wedding anniversary. They came home with new friends made, always getting to know others everywhere she's ever gone. Mom's welcomed visitors into her home for everything from a cup of coffee right up to dinner with care and hospitality. Or else she'd be off on some adventure with Dad, taking off across the country from one coast of Canada to the other. She's never been afraid to drive busy highways, unlike many other mothers I've known. She caught COVID twice, working through long-term care home outbreaks in the worst days of the pandemic. She watched some of the most medically fragile residents she truly cared for die of the virus, but thankfully she survived it. Next year, as she heads towards retirement, she will celebrate a quarter of a century doing that work, always doing what she's known how to do, seeing to the care of others. Firm in who she is, not taking things lying down, yet never looking for drama wherever possible. She's like her father, believing there is always a way, but that you've got to get on with it somehow. She demonstrated how to advocate all through our childhood. And now, as adults, we do that work, my brother and I, while she cheers us on from the sideline. Her example well set. Recently, her eyes were tested and the earliest signs of macular degeneration were detected. I just hope in the years ahead of and for whatever may come, that I can be there for her no matter what this disease decides to do. With the lived experience of blindness I've acquired from the foundation she laid down for us. She loves to teach her grandchildren, to spend time showing them everything she showed us. She means everything to my nieces and nephews, just as special as that bond I shared with her mom. And she's the center core of our family now. So moms know everything, do they? But moms were little girls once, little children too. Janet Kaye was a little birdie, flapping her outstretched arms like wings getting ready to fly.
That was really lovely, Kerry. Thank you for sharing that. What was
Thank
the
you.
process like for you writing this story?
I was saying to some people, I think maybe at the workshop or somebody in those last few weeks here, that I struggled with it, actually. My mom, as the story says, is still with us, thankfully. And I've written, as a writer, I've written about a lot of people, and I write a lot about my transplant experience. So that's me and my father, but I haven't, and my grandmothers, but I haven't really written much of my mom. And I don't know. It was strange.
Have you shared this story with your mom yet?
I haven't. That was another discussion too about like, who do you show it to at first? And so I'd love to show it to her at some point, no, I didn't want to. I was still developing it up till recently here, so I just I didn't want to bring it to her quite yet.
Do you feel like for you this story is completed, or do you feel like you will, maybe a year from now or whenever, pull it out again and add to it or change it, or like it's a living document?
I think I will. That's what Marilyn said a lot in the workshop about how these stories are never done. And I love that. And that's why these stories, I think, are works of art, because that's what I think about art. It's never done. So like we say, this story could be for me or her. I could give it to her as a gift. I could want to write it for my nieces and nephews someday. And then when things do change in our lives with her, I could add to this. Yeah. So yeah, it'll be like a ever evolving document, I guess.
Oh, I love that thought. Are you sticking around to join us for the Q&A at the end?
Yeah, I should be here. I try not to fall asleep if I can help it. It's a bit later, but
you're joining us 3 hours in the future, so I appreciate that. But
these stories are great, so I'm looking forward to hearing the rest of them told.
Awesome. All right, Kerry. Well, we're gonna say goodbye to you just for the moment,
okay,
and bring in our next storyteller. So that was Kerry, everybody. Now we're gonna welcome Eric into the space. Give Eric a moment to, there's Eric. Welcome, Eric. How are you this evening? Oh, you're on mute.
Okay, hello there.
Hello. How are you this evening?
I got a little bit flustered there because I lost I lost my connection and was locked out until I turned my computer off and on again. It wouldn't reconnect me. So there we are.
That's the thing that happens always on show day. The rehearsals, things go tickety boo. Actually, they say when you have a bad rehearsal, you'll have a great show. But either way, you're here with us, Eric, and that is a great thing. Would you like to introduce yourself to the group? Because this is the first time, as far as I'm aware, that you have been in the VocalEye Almost Live space.
Yes, I'm 70 years old. I am one of 7 kids, and I telling this story therefore has 6 built-in critics who will second guess the story. And I also, as I listen to these stories, they're so firsthand. I realize my mother has been gone for 20 years. Mm-hmm. And so I really think that this is the beginning of a process. And I'm getting towards something I'm actually comfortable with, but it's not as firsthand as I would like it to be. And,
well, as Kerry points out, and as Marilyn has said, these things can be tweaked and tinkered with, and but having something on the page to start with is absolutely where you need to start, right?
Right. True enough.
Well, yeah. Shall I give you the stage, my friend?
Thank you. I'm happy to begin. It was at the end of the First World War, and new life had begun. Muriel MacDonald was newly married to Donald MacDonald, and her first child was Joan MacDonald, born December 17th, 1918. Muriel had lost a brother, Lieutenant William Downey, to the war in Belgium in 1917, at the age of 21. The family was based in Cobourg, Ontario, and had Scottish, English, and French in their background. They were well off enough to have paid help around the house. Joan's sister Patsy was born 2 years later. Joan and Patsy grew to be good friends and playmates. Donald was born a couple of years later, and their father was devoted to his son. The children enjoyed school and sports. Both girls took figure skating and excelled at this. The family moved to Edmonton and later settled in Vancouver by 1930. Joan told us of her fond memories of sailing, swimming, and visits with friends at Cowan's Point on Bowen Island each summer. The girls competed for their father's attention. Young Donald was reputed to have sailed completely around Vancouver Island when he was 14 years of age. Joan described a special model sailboat of Donald's that was smashed when he was 12 and something about her being blamed. Sometime in the 30s, Joan, Patsy, and their mother, Muriel, were at the Woodward's department store on Hastings Street at the height of the Christmas season. They had finished their shopping and boarded the elevator at the 3rd floor. As soon as the doors closed, the elevator plummeted to the basement. The floor tilted and the crowded elevator crushed into a pile. My grandmother was pinned under the crowd, and her leg was shattered in many places. Patsy had a broken leg, and Joan had bent her knees and was the only uninjured passenger. After several surgeries, both Patsy and Muriel recovered. When Joan was 21 years of age, there's a film of her posing in her nursing cap with a red cape lined with red satin, and graduating from the from St. Paul's Nursing School. Joan's father was an avid photographer and had taken color film of this event. Both Joan and her sister Patsy were invited to try out for the Ice Capades. Joan was turned down because at 5'2" she was not tall enough. Patsy was hired by the Ice Capades and went to the United States and traveled with the show until she was married. When World War II began in Canada, Joan joined the Canadian Air Force as a leading airwoman. She was stationed in Prince Rupert and nursing at a hospital by the airfield. Joan recalled enjoying her wartime nursing career. She described the young pilots who were wounded during the war and sent to a hospital near home to recover. They had suffered trauma and some had terrible injuries. Joan's patients found her a compassionate listener as well as a skillful nurse. Joan later told her children that she was proposed to 16 times before she was married. Joan had a photo album, and among her pictures of Army friends was Robert Clothier, who later played Relic on the Beachcombers TV show. After the war, Joan went to the University of Toronto and graduated as an occupational therapist. She kept her instruments in a steel toolbox that contained leather punches, paintbrushes, knives, and hammers. It was not the average toolkit of a working woman of those days. In 1948, while Joan was on a volleyball team at the University of Toronto, she befriended a fellow team member, Colette Mulholland. Colette introduced Joan to her brother, Donald Mulholland. Joan was 32, Donald was 29. They were both Catholics, and they began a whirlwind romance, getting engaged and married within 3 months in May 1948. The new couple were challenged with 2 miscarriages in the first years of marriage, but they stayed together. Donald was working for $200 a month as an engineer. They were able to buy their first home in Scarborough, Ontario, 1951 for $7,000. In 1951, Joan gave birth to my brother, Adrian. I, Eric, was born in 1952. Mark was born in 53. Then came the 4 girls, Brenda in 55, Colette in 57, and finally the non-identical twins, Donna and Denise, in 59. Joan observed that she'd been pregnant for over 5 solid years. Joan always said she had 2 miscarriages and 7 children. She believed that as a nurse, she had a responsibility to speak about her miscarriages. As a nurse, Joan knew the risks of having further children after 42 and decided she needed a hysterectomy. My father arranged for the parish priest to visit our home to tell my mother it was her duty to bear more children and that to choose a hysterectomy was a mortal sin. Joan told the priest and my father that that the matter was her personal medical decision and their opinion was not helpful. Took a lot of courage to resist the church and my father in those days. Joan got a Volkswagen Beetle and loaded all 7 of us in for shopping trips. There were no seat belts or child seats. She would smoke cigarettes and insist on keeping the windows tightly closed in the winter. It was routinely 20 below zero in Ontario winters. One day, Joan was driving alone and she was rear-ended and awoke in the back seat with her legs over her head. She said her first thought was, "Did I remember to put on underwear?" For years, Joan complained of an ulcer, and she ate a bland diet recommended by her doctor to avoid pains. When she went in for an exploratory surgery, the surgeons discovered stomach cancer, and she had 2/3 of her stomach removed. Joan was a gifted and creative artist, starting to paint before she had children. She met Jack Shadbolt and Tony Onley before the war, and many fellow artists later in life. Her charcoal sketches and drawings led to many hundreds of canvases. In Vancouver, Joan signed her canvases Jan O'Van. She painted after her children went to bed, and often late into the night. Joan appeared fearless in many social situations and was known to be feisty when she wanted something changed. She loved to tell stories about her children, her life, and her relatives. She was well known for talking to strangers in lineups and at stores and on the street. My mother was known for her laugh and her sense of humor. Her family knew that she had a fierce temper, and we all tried to avoid it. She was well known for her red lipstick, and all her cigarette butts were smeared with red. Joan drank alcohol when playing bridge and laughed more loudly as the game and drinks went on. She had friends from childhood, from her school years, from her war years, and she kept in touch, in person and by phone, and with much letter writing. She was a capable seamstress and made outfits for her 4 girls in the early years. Joan wrote short stories and sent some correspondence to John Drane at CBC Radio. She had many favorite books and read poetry and stories to her children when we were young. We were remembering The Owl and the Pussycat by Edward Beer just recently. In 1969, our parents decided to move to BC. We packed and sold the house, and all of us took a train to BC in December. The 3-day trip was memorable. We watched from the train as the snows of winter disappeared as we entered the green of the Fraser River Valley. We began the next decade in BC. Joan found a house to rent in Shaughnessy, and then in 1974 found a house nearby to purchase for $37,000. My mother was often loving, charming, and friendly, and when many of our high school friends came over after school, they adopted her. Few of us teenagers were greeted so pleasantly in other households. In 1974, my parents were drinking alcohol much more heavily. There was an epic raging argument around Christmas that was the beginning of their separation. Joan's angry accusation to my father was, "You have all the sensitivity of a slug." It seemed to summarize the emotional frustrations of an artist with an engineer at the time. It was quite a split, a bitter split, but neither wanted to get divorced, as divorce was quite difficult for Catholics to obtain. My father moved out. After several years, my father began to attend AA, and after his retirement in the 1980s, he went to Toronto for half a year to quit drinking and smoking. Joan's mother died in 1976, and this left her more sad than she expected to be. Her brother died soon after, leaving a family suffering from the effects of his almost lifelong drinking. Meanwhile, the girls were in their teens and sometimes a challenge. Joan was plagued by bouts of depression and loneliness. She had progressive hearing loss from an injury to her to her eardrum that she was from her time in the Air Force. Smoking all of her life led her to developing COPD and the beginning of emphysema. Joan may have come to a crossroads in her life at that time. Joan had a serious suicide attempt. She drove off the road at a single vehicle accident. Joan was taken to VGH by ambulance and certified to psychiatric care for several days. Joan went home and began to rally. She began to write and talk more seriously about her life to her friends. She was also writing letters to my father about her struggles. She slowed down her drinking severely. Joan told her family of a difficult night she had struggling with a heavy cold and breathing problems. She had a vivid dream about a Scottish ancestor floating cross-legged at the end of her bed and telling her to come with me, lass. She considered it a near-death experience. She quit smoking cold turkey at age 70. Several of her children collaborated to buy her an ounce of gold on her 70th birthday for $700 an ounce in 1988. She was making jewelry at the time and smelted silver and gold in her home workshop. At 72, Joan became a student in VCC's first school of jewelry art and design. The school was a level of professional training that was demanding and well-rounded. She was finishing silver and gold jewelry along with setting lapidary and semi-precious stones. Joan was amazed to meet her niece Terry in the class of 30. She was adopted by her younger classmates. Joan completed that 2-year course and became a member of several lapidary clubs across town. She made hundreds of pieces of inventive rings, bracelets, necklaces, and brooches, mostly for gifts. Joan and Donald resumed living together in 1984, despite the fact they had not spoken a civil word to each other in 10 years. Joan and Donald were able to make a new peace and love that was sober and lasting. Both had found independent skills and activities. They were able to celebrate the weddings of their 7 children and the births of 17 grandchildren that came from 1985 and after. Joan and Donald sold the Shaughnessy home for $590,000 in 1991 and moved to a North Vancouver townhouse. Donald had a series of strokes that put him in assisted care in 1994. Joan visited him weekly until his death, December 17, 1997. Within the next year, Patsy, Joan's younger sister, died of a sudden heart attack. Patsy's 3 adult children became much closer to her after this. Joan lived in her home to 2002 and was 83 when she died. Her funeral was attended by over 200 people. I loved my mother. I became a friend of hers. I honor her for becoming an artist and a mother of 7, for serving as a healer and a nurse, and for being a loving person.
Eric, that was lovely. What were you saying when you started? What were you worried about?
I don't know what I was worried about. I think I think women have a more personal bond with their mother, and maybe I hesitate to talk more about feelings and those kinds of things. I feel like there's some things still escaping me, and I would like to get a hold of them. And there was also many sort of body jokes my mother used to tell. That remembering her saying her grandmother used to say, "That's as useless as balls and a teddy bear."
Yeah.
I just there were things that that are characteristic of the times and so on that have been percolating up actually in my dreams. So I've really found this a rich resource, and I do thank Marilyn and the VocalEye for sponsoring this, and I'll continue working at it.
Well, that was my next question, was whether it would be a living document for you as well, that you'll continue to hone and craft and look at and think about stuff and populate it with new things.
I think it's possible I could take on my father's story as well.
Yes.
It's just a different story.
Yes. Do you feel like you have more of a bond with your father in the way that you feel like women might have more bonds with their mothers?
I think that my father was a man of his day and age, who did not speak much about feelings, and so the descriptors and the dialogues with him are different.
Are different, yeah. I told you when we were in the workshop together that that your story really resonated with me. In particular, the part around your mother attending the jewelry design program at VCC, which I also took. I took the jewelry design course, and I took the gemology course, and I just was about maybe 7 months away from graduating when my sight loss occurred. So I have all the knowledge, but not maybe the trusty eyes to be able to use pickling stuff and soldering and open flame. I don't think I have the guts to do that in my own home anyways, but it really resonated with me because I kind of felt like I was there in those classrooms doing the thing that she was doing right beside her. So there are things about everybody's story that's going to resonate with folks. So I thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
It's really lovely. Have you shared this story with family and friends?
I have, and I invited some, and there may be some in our audience.
Well, then you're definitely sticking around for the Q&A, right?
Sure.
Yeah, wonderful. All right, Eric. Well, we're going to say goodbye to you for the moment and bring in our next storyteller, and then we'll all gather again at the end for our little Q&A. So I'm going to welcome Rebecca Singh in the space, who is going to be reading a story for Nancy Gill. So let's bring Rebecca and Nancy both in the space. And Rebecca, while we're waiting for Nancy to join us, which the VocalEye team will bring her in a moment,
okay.
Can you maybe just introduce yourself to our audience?
Yes, absolutely. So I'm Rebecca Singh. I'm an audio describer and an actor, and I have a frog in my throat that I'm going to overcome.
From France? I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I'm based in Toronto, so in Takaranto Treaty 13 territory. I've been in this space, I think, previously as a recorded entity, but I'm excited to be here in person for the first time. And on my background, I'm a mixed race person with German, Nigerian, and East Indian heritage, and I'm excited to read the story.
Awesome. Thank you, Rebecca. Nancy, you're the writer of the story. What was the process like for you in trying to write your mother's story?
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Wow, it was so interesting. I would like to say thank you, everyone, and my family for coming and joining me today. I wanted to show my mom how much she meant to me, and this is how I wanted her to see the story about what I wrote. It made me feel that I want to do something special, and I'm glad I'm here today to show my mom's story. And today I'm wearing what she had always, she had given me the top. So every session that we had, I wore this pink top. And today I wore the heart my dad gave me when my mom passed away. And I do have her elephant because she loves elephant. And as you guys were talking, I found a picture of my mom wearing the pink top that I'm wearing. So I'm honored to do this story for my mom, and I hope you all enjoy it.
Oh, that's nice, Nancy, that you've got your mom around you where we'll listen to this story together.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, so let's give the stage over to Rebecca, and then when Rebecca's done reading the story, we'll have a little chat with Nancy. So Rebecca, the stage is yours.
Following Mom's footsteps. As long as I can remember, Mom was my pillar. She never liked being the center of attention, not even at her children's weddings. She was always the steady force behind the scenes, making sure everything was perfect and everyone was happy. Her favorite color was dusty rose, and she baked the best apple pies from trees in our backyard. I want to tell her story. Jasbir Kaur Clouty was born on February 8, 1940, in Lahore, Pakistan. The family was from the Punjab village, but due to Mum's earlier than expected birth, Grandma delivered her in Lahore and returned to the Punjab village a month later. Jasbir was the second oldest of 9 children. She grew up in the Punjab village, granddaughter to a parliamentarian who was an active freedom fighter during India's struggle for independence. As the oldest sibling, Mum would often take the younger kids to the movies. She was also the only one who learned English so she could help her father, my grandfather, in his political work. Mum married my dad, Geet Bital, in an arranged marriage in India on April 4th, 1958. It seems strange to me that my dad decided to take a honeymoon trip without her, but Mum didn't have proper travel papers at the time. Dad, a Canadian of East Indian heritage, had never been to India and wanted to travel throughout the region. Dad and Mum would later take an extended honeymoon trip, which Mum enjoyed very much. 6 months after the wedding, at the age of 18, Mum moved to Victoria with Dad's family. The first year was hard for her. Her privileged life in India had not prepared her to cook or manage a household. She longed to join her younger sisters-in-law when they dressed up for nights into town. They were 21, 18, and 16, and only the oldest was married at the time. Although they became very close to Mum, they only saw her as their brother's new wife back then. Homesick, Mum spent many nights crying and longing to return to India. Mum learned a lot from her mother-in-law. She learned to love keeping a clean and beautiful home. She learned to grow and use herbs in my grandfather's garden to make cha tea and marsala. When she eventually had her own backyard, she used all the organic produce in her cooking. My oldest sister, Indra, was born in 1959. Coincidentally, Mum and Grandma were pregnant at the same time, so we have an aunt who is the same age as Indra. Indra was known for her blue eyes. I, Nancy, came next in 1961. My sister Sherry was born in 1962, and my brother Jerry was born in 1963. Kashmir, the youngest daughter, was born in 1969. The birth of a boy, according to my grandfather, deserved a new house. So in 1963, our family moved into a house 4 doors down from my grandparents on Dublin Road. Mum needed one of those huge strollers that looked like a bucket on wheels to cart us around. Neighbors would call us the monkey children when Mum packed us all up for the 20-minute trek downtown because we would be hanging out of the stroller. Mum loved dressing Indra, Sherry, and I in the same dresses. Neighbors knew us Beetle girls on sight in our Woolco dresses. Kashmir was spared the hand-me-downs because she was so much younger. It was no wonder Mum never worked. It is East Indian tradition that the man brings in the money while his wife stays home to cook and clean. Mum never had a problem with that. We had an elderly white neighbor we used to call Grandma, and she taught Mum how to cook Canadian food. Mum loved adding interesting ingredients to the meals just to encourage us kids to eat. She used to cook huge turkey and ham dinners and host our uncles and aunts and cousins at our grandfather's house. "They never invite us over," she said one day. And from that point forward, she spent her Sundays with us and Dad going for drives around Victoria. She did enjoy crocheting slippers for family, another skill she learned from our white grandma next door. Dad and Mum had an easy rhythm. Dad entertained, Mum cooked. She loved cooking. She was the one who would get up early and head down to the temple to make meals for everyone. In later years, she would put her own twist on Canadian dishes I taught her, adding spices and seasonings to invent her own dish. For someone who grew up with servants cooking for her, Mum was really good at watching and learning from other people. She once took a cooking class with me so that I could get an A. She did all the work and I reaped the reward. That was my mom. It was mom who went with me to all my doctor's appointments when I was diagnosed with cancer as a teen. Mom stayed with me throughout the days in the hospital. She passed on her talent for housekeeping to me. I would often end up doing chores the others in the house were supposed to do. When my marriage fell apart in 1985, I left Vancouver and returned home to my parents in Victoria. They did all they could to help me save my marriage, but supported my decision to build a better life for myself and daughter, Chantel. Mom adored her granddaughter, and Chantel adored her. When my son Nathan was born and Nathan's dad tried to sue for custody because I was losing my vision, Mom was right by my side, insisting that no one could take a baby from his mother. Mom was so independent and in charge that she blamed herself for things out of her control. No matter how many times I reassured her that my cancer wasn't her fault, she refused to accept it. It was the same when I started losing my vision in my 20s. Kashmir, too, lost her sight in her 20s. Not Mom's fault, but still, she shouldered that guilt. In 2010, my oldest sister, Indra, passed away from cancer. It devastated Mom. I suppose she felt responsible for that, too, irrational as it was. Not long after Indra's passing, Mom suffered a series of massive strokes. "I'm not going to a rest home," she said to us. "I took care of all of you my whole life. Now it's your turn to take care of me." Dad was determined to honor her wishes. Our entire family rallied around Mom. My uncles and aunts would bring food over, and us kids were always making sure she was comfortable. Dad and Sherry were the ones who lived with her. The last 10 years of Mom's life could not have been easy for Dad or Sherry, but my heart ached for Mom. I was with her during her last days. Another series of strokes had taken even more out of her. I was sitting at her bedside in the hospital one day when I saw a bright light. I looked up and saw Indra smiling at me from the top of a staircase. "You've had so many birthdays with Mom," my sister said. "It's my turn." I knew Indra was right. "You can go, Mom," I told her, and felt a weight lift off my shoulders. At her funeral, I placed an elephant ornament on her chest and kissed her goodbye. "I love you, Mom," I said. "You mean the world to me." Mom always found those words hard to say. She said it was because she was never taught to love in that way. I always reminded her to say those words from her heart because I knew she loved us with all her heart. I hope Indra cooked her a feast for her 80th birthday. Knowing Indra, she probably had food catered. I taught Indra to cook, but she didn't inherit Mom's love of cooking. I did. My mom always protected me. I remember leaving Victoria because I hated how she treated me like a kid. But I always returned to Mom because she was my biggest supporter. I want to believe I am following in her footsteps.
Thank you, Rebecca. What are your reflections on reading that story before we bring Nancy back?
It's so complex and real, and just the desire, to honor, somebody and in all the parts of them. I think it's just a beautiful story.
Well, you read it beautifully. Nancy, we're going to bring you in. So
The
Nancy,
host spotlighted your video for everyone.
Can you hear me?
yeah, we can hear you. So you were part of the 4-week workshop?
Yes, I was.
How are you doing? How are you
The
feeling?
host has spotlighted your video for everyone.
Every time I read, I start crying. It's touching, very I miss my mom, and I'm glad I wrote this story. You know, I wanted to say a lot, and I'm going to add more. I feel that she's with me, and you know, she's my supporter, and I'm still following her dream, what she taught me. I'm so honored to do this story, and I'm glad I got involved because, you know, it's helped me. And Chrissy, the one who was my writer, and she did a wonderful job. And thank you, Chrissy, for helping me out because I knew I could never do this alone. And with my disability, that she had opened it and helped me out with the story for 4 weeks, and we got along. And this is wonderful. Without Chrissy, I wouldn't get to do this story. And thank you, and Marilyn, for allowing us to do this and to show this opportunity to everyone what our mom's all about. I'm still crying, sorry.
That's okay. You're allowed to be impacted, Nancy. This is your mom we're talking about, so it's okay to take a moment. There's a lot of really beautiful things there. A little bit like a roller coaster. Like you can love your mom so much, but then you're like, no, I got to get out of here. That's too much love. But you always find your way back, right?
I did show this. Last night I wanted to do this on Mother's Day, but the story didn't get out on time. But I had to change a little bit word, so I sent it to my dad last night. So this morning I said, Dad, did you read the email? I go, what are you talking about? I did the story about my mom. He goes, oh. So he phoned me back. I go, who wrote it? I go, why? He goes, it's a good story. I like it. Like, are you kidding me? You didn't put me down this time? So he really was shocked that he said it was wonderful. That made me feel good because at the beginning, don't you put anything bad about my family. Don't you put anything bad. Like, you know what? It's Dad. It's my story. I'm doing this, but I want to feel about my mom, right? Yeah. It was a struggle because of getting information out, finding a solution, I had to go to India to find the truth about this elephant that I have in my hand today, because she always said she had an elephant in their backyard, but it was an elephant that kept coming in her village and staying in her yard to drink water. So this is where the elephant comes from. So, you know, I'm so honored that I went to India to hear the truth about my mom.
That's quite a gift.
Yeah.
If there are folks that are like, especially folks in the blind community, because you are somebody who comes every Wednesday, whether you're in Hawaii or whether you're here in Vancouver, you show up to these arts adventures every Wednesday. And so you were hearing me talk about the fact that this workshop has been coming up for weeks, right? And did you ever think to yourself, oh, I don't know if I can do this? Or did you just decide I'm going to take a chance and do it?
Well, like I said, I was scared because I'm not a writer, and I my thing is I can't write, and I don't read. I read what I see what I can. I can't put everything together anyway. But my brain, I have a brain that I can. Oh my God, I remember everything. I'm good at numbers, so you know, writing it. I don't have to write. I have memories of everything. Because my mom, when I was sick, my mom told me stories, and I remember saying those stories back and forth. But no one's going to believe this story until I write it. So having this opportunity, someone said that Chrissy, this girl, could help me, and I thought, oh my God, can you please help me? And you know, it made it like, you know, I didn't want to ruin the story. I wanted it to be perfect, right? And Chrissy, thank you from the bottom of my heart for doing this for me.
Oh, that's really kind. Okay, Nancy, we're gonna bring you back when the Q&A happens at the end. And then maybe there are some folks in the audience that want to ask you some questions about your process or about your mom, and we'll bring you back at that time, okay?
Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Grab yourself a tissue. You deserve it. It's a beautiful job.
Thank you.
We're going to bring Anne into the space next. So let's bring Anne in. There's Anne. Welcome, Anne. How are you this evening?
I'm good. Thank you, Amy.
Yeah. You've been listening to a couple of these
1,250, 4 stars, 588.
I'm just gonna mute Nancy there. That's wonderful. You've been listening to these stories that have been told. What are your reflections so far?
They touch me so much, and their stories are so different, but so special and so unique, and across generations and cultures. And it's just amazing how we're all so touched. And
how did you find out about the My Mother Story workshop?
I was through CNIB, actually. They had reached out to me and asked me if I would be interested in this. And I was thought, wow, this is such a great idea and such a great opportunity. And then I applied for it.
And like Nancy, were you feeling on the fence or scared or just willing to take a chance? What was your feeling about it?
Definitely scared and on the fence and willing to take a chance. With how I feel with my mom, it's very, very emotional. It's a huge wound that I've been holding for a long time. And so I felt, this would be a good healing process for me. And it has been, and I'm so grateful for this opportunity and all the members in the workshop who have been so supportive, and Marilyn, who has been incredible and literally just held my hand through this and helped me get through this.
All right, my friend. Well, I'm ready to hand the stage over to you. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. Stage is yours.
My mother's story. The sound of footsteps running to a knee-high round dining table. 12 siblings each pull up their individual stools. A pair of jade chopsticks engraved with their names is placed at their setting. This table is where, over a meal, they would gather to connect and share stories. This is the story of my mother, Matilda Oi Hing Leung Ten, born on September 19, 1944 in Canton, China. Her journey is filled with ups and downs, perseverance, and a strong commitment to family. Matilda's story is one of tenacity, determination, and resilience. Matilda, known as Samgaje, meaning third sister of 12 siblings. Her father had 2 wives, a common practice during that time, especially when the primary wife fails to produce a son. Out of the 12, there were 2 boys and the rest were girls. The family had also adopted 2 little girls as child number 2 and number 5 had passed away at birth. Her father's influence played a significant role in shaping Matilda's character. He had overcome the bankruptcy and the loss of his own father, himself starting from a penniless state, and then working his way up as a cook and eventually becoming a restaurateur. Relocating to Kowloon, Hong Kong, her family settled in a small flat opposite their restaurant. The flat was one large room where the siblings shared queen-size beds and later switched to bunk beds as they grew older. The rooftop of their building became their playground, where they enjoyed the sea breeze and flew kites. Despite their crowded living conditions, the siblings never fought. Their time was filled with laughter, games, and shared resources. Their collective funds were pooled to purchase manga and a children's publication called The Kids' Paradise, fostering their love for reading. Matilda's caring nature and sense of responsibility shone through at a young age. She put into practice the first aid skills she learned from St. John's Ambulance when she tended to a girl who had fallen from her home until the ambulance arrived. This incident showcased her compassion and aptitude for helping others. Growing older, Matilda's vibrant personality blossomed. She had a flair for fashion, loved dancing and singing, and even taught her younger brother, laborious number 8, dances like the mashed potato. She also loved to play table tennis with her younger brother. In 1962, Matilda graduated from high school. At that time, career options for women were limited. You either became a nurse, teacher, or a secretary. Her godparents, the owners of a grocery store, paid for her flight to Melbourne, Australia, where she attended secretarial college. She worked part-time to cover her tuition and living expenses, cherishing the memories of her time in Australia and the lessons from her house mother, such as baking biscuits and scones. It was in Australia that she met my father, Martin Ten, 6 years her senior. He received his engineering degree, but Matilda had never finished hers. They married in 1968 when Matilda was 24 years old, and a year later, they welcomed their first child, my brother Kevin. 3 years later, I was born. While we were young, Matilda worked while relying on a nanny to care for us. In 1974, our parents made the decision to immigrate to Canada. She had 2 siblings now in Canada. Her brother, laborious number 8, was studying at the University of Alberta and was now playing competitive badminton. Her sister, number 7, Yvonne, had settled in Vancouver, BC. Upon arriving in Canada, we settled in an apartment in Burnaby. Mom worked during the day, and in May 1974, she gave birth to my sister Madeline at Grace Hospital, which is now known as BC Women's Hospital. However, Madeline's birth came with complications. She was born with an extra kidney, which required extensive hospital stays. There she met another mom who had a child in the hospital as well. They bonded and became best friends over the next 15 years. After 3 years in Canada, my mom and dad purchased a single-family home in North Burnaby. It was located in a quiet neighborhood near the elementary school, so we could walk back and forth to school while our parents worked. We were latchkey kids. Mom and dad owned an antique store in Burnaby initially, but financial difficulties led them to close the store, and dad went to pursue a career in real estate. Mom worked at Woodward's in downtown Vancouver. I remember us kids piling into the car to pick her up from work. At Christmas, we always went to see the holiday displays in the Woodward's windows. It was now the 80s, and financial times were getting tight. Mom and dad faced financial struggles, leading them to sell their home, and we became renters. It was very important for my mom to make sure we had opportunities to try things that she never got a chance to do and remain close to our culture. She put us in all kinds of extracurricular activities. We did Chinese school, Chinese dancing, painting, and calligraphy. We took ballet, acrobat, tap dancing, singing, and piano lessons. My brother was in baseball, soccer, and track and field. Despite the financial challenges, Mom emphasized the importance of education and enrolled us in private schools. Mom was a quiet role model for us. She constantly strived for self-improvement by attending night school. She incredibly climbed up the ladder in male-dominated fields. For example, Pirelli Tires and Comtech, a business that sold computer keyboard parts. Both Mom and Dad worked. Dad seemed to be working less. Mom seemed to be working more. Our family moved 3 times every 2 years from one apartment to the next. At this point, my parents' marriage was crumbling. My father was not working and was declaring bankruptcy. My brother had moved out to live with his girlfriend. Between 1988 and 89, my mom also took in 2 sisters, ages 3 and 7, on an emergency basis as foster kids. It was around this time that Mom had a falling out with her best friend, and that relationship ended. The exact reason is unclear to me, but it had to do with the 2 little girls. At long last, after many years of going to night school, she got her certificate in import and export, and in 1990, she got a job with Canfor, Canadian Forest Products. She worked in the purchasing department. She would work there for 12 years and rise to the position of manager, supply agreements and taxes. Her office was at Bentall Centre 4 in downtown Vancouver. One day in 1991, my dad got up, took his things, and left the family. With determination and hard work, Mom purchased her first home, a townhouse in Surrey. She would spend her working years getting up at 5 a.m. to try and beat the rush hour traffic, to commute the 30 kilometers to get to downtown Vancouver, and would often stay later at work to do the same thing. She would return home at 7 p.m. She also started to give back by teaching night school through the Vancouver School Board. She even published a book. For the next 8 years, from 1992 to 2001, my mom celebrated many blessings. My brother Kevin got married, and she welcomed 3 grandchildren, my kids, Shanessa, Christopher, and Lauren. My mom and Shanessa had a special bond over those years. Shanessa loved taking bubble baths in Grandma's giant bathtub and lying in her grandma's bed reading while Grandma was sitting at her desk working. My mom found a big fan of her biscuits and scones in Christopher. He always looked forward to devouring them and was always excited to show how high he could jump off the couch. My mom loved scooping up Lauren into her arms to give big hugs and cuddles. Lauren loved crawling to find Grandma's purse, dig through it, and search for her car keys. In 1997, she was so proud when she was able to purchase a large single-family home in a beautiful neighborhood in Surrey. It was a symbol of her overcoming all the challenges that she had, and it provided the safety and security that she needed. It had a double-car garage, 3 bedrooms, a beautiful principal suite with a dreamy bathroom, a walk-in closet, beautiful kitchen and living spaces, a backyard with a garden where she could plant blue hydrangeas, which were her favorite. It even had a suite for rental income. A year later, she hosted my wedding reception in her backyard. It was a time to reunite with many of her siblings who came from New York to visit her, come for the wedding, and then they all went on an Alaskan cruise. This was a memorable highlight. Years later, they would still be reminiscing and talking about their Alaskan cruise. Mom continued to prioritize family, frequently traveling to visit her siblings in New York. They traveled in a pack, always laughing and talking. It literally took them hours for them to get from one place to another. Her dedication to her siblings remained unwavering. She provided support during difficult times. In October 2002, my mom received divorce papers from my dad. All these years, she had always kept him on her work benefits plan. On Friday, November 22nd, 2002, after work, my mom went to visit her sister, number 7, Yvonne. This was the sister who was first in Vancouver when she immigrated to Canada. That Sunday, myself, my husband, and her 3 grandkids came over to her house for our usual family dinner. We shared stories around the same dining table Mom had kept through every move since being in Canada. The next day, she was to fly to Prince George for work. She would be away from Monday and return on Friday. This was a regular part of her job. On the Wednesday, she attended a work event in Prince George. Many of her colleagues expressed that she was bright, cheerful, and happy. The next day, she was experiencing chest pains and shortness of breath. She took a cab to Prince George Regional Hospital. Tests were done, and it was determined that she had a left lower lobe pneumonia. She was discharged back to her hotel room. The next morning, her colleague was trying to contact her as they were to leave for the airport and come home to Vancouver. But she had already passed away in her sleep. My mother, Matilda, passed away on November 29th, 2002, at the young age of 58. Her funeral was attended by countless people, and the outpouring of love and support was a testament to the impact she had on those around her. There were so many flowers, it was like a garden. My mom had worked so hard all these years to make sure her children could have a good education. She spent a lot of time at work. She had an incredible work family that thought so highly of her. She was sharp, smart, a dynamo, and described as a Yorkshire Terrier, small in size, but there was absolutely no doubt of who was in charge. She was well known and respected in the industry, not only for her knowledge of customs issues, laws, and regulations, but also the wonderful person and friend that she was. She was admired for her great mind and totally original thoughts. Her colleagues considered her a mentor, friend, and even a mother figure. Despite the challenges she faced, Mom left a lasting legacy of love, hard work, and dedication to her family. Her footsteps have served as an inspiration to me and to others to overcome adversity and make a positive impact on the world. In the end, each life is a miracle that has the power to change the world and leave it a better place than before. Mom, through your determination, tenacity, and resilience, you exemplified this truth.
Very nice, and I can see how much your mother meant to you and still means to you.
Yes.
It's quite endearing. For you, I mean, I've asked everybody this, but what was the process like for writing the story?
It was very healing. I had to really dig down and go through the history. I didn't know a lot about her earlier years, but with Marilyn's recipe, I started from what I remember. And it was all like just hard times. And then we had talked in our workshops about the hard and the good and looking at those positive things. And then I started to reach out to family, her siblings, and they provided with me some other information. And I saw this like circle coming together. And it really provided me more clarity of who she was as a person. And that's the ultimate thing, is to understand her.
Yeah, because she was so very young.
Yes.
And so there was a lot of stuff that that you would have missed out on together.
Yes.
When we lose people who are young in our families. Do you feel like this process in talking to your mom's siblings and some of the family and learning more about her, not only was it healing, but do you think that it connected you with those family members in a different way?
Yes, very much, because they're all getting older as well. And us as the next generation, the cousins, we do want to keep those memories. We do want to be able to have the stories of our parents. So we are sharing them and keeping them close. So it's been very, very helpful for all of us because we, had a couple of aunts that have passed away, and we don't want to lose any more stories.
Do you think anybody will go back and write the stories of the aunts just based on purely what they know and what you can drum up within the family?
I think so. I think we're all thinking more about it now, because now that we have our children, we want those memories for our children. My children are older, so they remember the aunts more, whereas some of my cousins, their children are much younger, so they won't really remember. And I mean, they're just a funny pack,
It's interesting now that your children become the knowledge holders.
Yes.
For the younger ones in the family.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
That is often what oral history of families is like, right? And I feel like sometimes we don't think about capturing these stories until it's too late to capture these stories. And I've experienced that in my family. So don't sit on the fence. Do it.
No.
It doesn't have to be read out loud, doesn't have to be published, it could just be for you.
Yes. Absolutely. And take the pictures and live your life.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Thank you, Anne, for sharing
Thank you.
Your story, and we'll see you back at the Q&A afterwards. I'm going to invite our next storyteller into the space, and this is going to be Rita's story, and Cheryl is going to be reading for Rita, so we'll bring them both on in.
Hello.
Okay, we got Cheryl back, and have we got Rita yet? There's Rita.
Well, I did get it on. Yeah.
Yeah. There you are, my friend. We see you. We hear you.
Right.
So Cheryl's going to be your reader, but because Cheryl's already introduced herself to the group, Rita, I'm curious for yourself. When you heard about this My Mother's Story event, what your initial thoughts were about it, whether you were excited or scared or all of the above.
I was actually quite excited, but you know, okay. I actually attended a My Mother's Story event as a fundraiser a few years ago.
Mm-hmm.
It was for the deaf and hard of hearing at VCC, Vancouver Community College, which is I teach at the Vancouver Community College.
See, another
in the
connection with
visually impaired
Eric's
program.
story, right?
So anyway, so I heard these stories during that fundraising.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, oh, that's a nice kind of a thing to do. Then I didn't really think about it until you guys started talking about this workshop. And I thought, wow, that's really exciting. Let's give it a try. I wish I had done this years and years ago because, of course, my mom has been gone about 16 years and a lot of her generation is gone too. She was born in 1924. So, a lot of her friends are gone. Only a few of her friends are still alive. So, I did a little bit of collecting stories, from my sister and cousins, but it was mostly, my own memories.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had to organize the memories because she's a very multifaceted person. So, there were too many things to write, honestly. But
Yeah, you only get
it
2,000
was a
words.
great, yeah, exactly.
Recipe.
But
Yeah.
it was fun doing it, and yeah.
All right. Well, I think we should let Cheryl read this story. What do you think, Rita?
Yeah, sure.
And then we'll chat with you afterwards. So, Cheryl, how about you take the stage and read Rita's mother's story?
Yeah, Rita, thank you for letting me read your story, your mother's story.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
My mother, Dora Dilek, was born Dora Anav on December 12th, 1924, in the Asian part of Istanbul, Turkey. Istanbul is the only city in the world which is on 2 continents. Dora was the second of 4 children born to a Sephardic Jewish couple. The third child, Stella, died of diphtheria at 2. So when the 4th child, Jeanette, was born 9.5 years after Dora, she and the eldest, Leon, became very precious, and Dora was neglected and ignored by her mother. The Sephardim are Spanish Jews who took refuge in the Ottoman Empire in 1492 during the Inquisition. The community still spoke 15th century Spanish at home when Dora was growing up. Dora was sent to a French immersion school run by Catholic nuns in their neighborhood. But when her parents found out she was being taught the catechism, they decided to homeschool her. Dora felt really bad about this, as she would have liked to go to a regular school with other children. Her education continued in French, however, as was the case with that whole generation of Middle Eastern Jews and Christians at that time. She later managed to go to university and study English philology, and she also studied modern Spanish at the Spanish consulate. Dora came from a musical family on her mother's side. Her maternal cousins, both male and female, all studied the piano, and one followed a musical career. Dora's mother had a beautiful pre-World War I piano from Germany. She played classical music and also played and sang the popular songs of the day from music sheets. The whole family enjoyed sitting around the piano and singing the songs. But Dora instinctively disliked the classical Middle Eastern music and would cry when her mother played that style, even when she was a baby. Dora felt that music was important to quality of life, and when she had her own children, she took us to concerts and operas, even at a young age, and ensured we had music lessons for years, as long as we enjoyed it. When Dora was a teenager, her family moved to the European part of Istanbul, closer to the area where my father grew up. I don't actually know how my parents met, but they each had a group of friends, and the 2 groups eventually were going out together. Young people in that community were not allowed to have individual dates, but they could go out on group dates. My father, Rita Dilek, was about a year older and studying law. The group of friends often went to movies or cafes together. They also danced the ballroom dances popular at the time. The courtship lasted many years. During my parents' late teens and early 20s, the Second World War was taking place. Turkey did not actually enter the war till nearly the end, but they were very close to Greece and Bulgaria and other invaded countries. Istanbul is close to that area. The city was under blackout, food rationing, and many other restrictions. Being Jewish, the families felt especially threatened by the possibility of German invasion. They knew of their relatives in Greece who were killed, and some who managed to take refuge in Istanbul. They often spoke of the war years and the relatives they had lost when I was a child. Dora and Errol married on August 22nd, 1948, when they were around 24. It was traditional for young couples to move in with one or other set of in-laws. Since Errol was an only child, and Leon and Jeanette were still living with Dora's parents, the new couple moved in with Errol's parents. As stressful as living with her in-laws might have been, Dora was grateful not to live with her own very critical and bad-tempered mother. She swore she would never treat her own children and family the way her mother had mistreated her, and always liked to speak very gently, politely, and considerately to everyone. Dora and Errol wanted children very badly, but when they somehow could not conceive, they discovered her uterus was too small. She had to take some hormone treatments to increase its size. When she finally got pregnant, she was under constant threat of miscarriage. So she had to be on bed rest for nearly 8 months. The same thing happened during her second pregnancy, with another 8 months of bed rest. Errol and the in-laws took care of the first baby during the second bed rest. They had 2 daughters, 14 months apart, Rita and Rena, or 1952 and 1953. Dora realized her older daughter had trouble seeing when the girls were about 2 and 3. If a small object fell on the floor, Rena would be pouncing on it, while Rita was still looking around to find where it went. They took me to an ophthalmologist. He said, "She has retinitis pigmentosa. This is a degenerative eye disease, and she will go blind. So don't bother sending her to school. Keep her at home and teach her Braille if you can." Dora and Errol were quite frantic about this, judging by the number of doctor's visits in the next few years, and even a medical trip to France and Germany to consult famous doctors. But they did not give in to that first doctor's negative predictions. They got me all the low vision aids I could use and decided to send me to school and see what would happen. My parents and grandparents made sure I could read before I started school and taught me math so I could be prepared. This is when my mother's work in advocacy began. She talked to teachers and school principals to ensure I got a front seat in the class and good light so I could see what I was writing. She also defended me from teachers who wanted to penalize me for poor handwriting. Later, when the school had multiple choice exams, which I could not read fast enough, she advocated for the school to provide me with a reader. She researched services available in other countries to blind and partially sighted. She arranged for me to get recorded books from Recording for the Blind in the US and other spoken records from the British consulate. By the time I was halfway through high school, both I and the rest of the family were persuaded that I should go to study in the United States, where academic scholarships and services to the blind were more easily available. My mother also suggested that I board at my high school for a couple of years so that I could get used to being more independent of the family to prepare for going to university abroad. During this time, my mother was less busy with advocacy and reading books for me, so she decided she would really love to work outside the home. My father vetoed this. He said people would look down on him because they would think he could not support his family. In 1971, I went to university in Boston, Massachusetts. My mother came with me to make sure I settled into the dorm okay, and she stayed in the US about 3 months. When she finally went home, she was very depressed. She had psyched herself to send me away, but my leaving left a very large empty space. She had spent many years recording books and advocating for me, and now she had a lot of worries and nothing to spend her energy on. When my father realized how terrible she felt, he changed his mind about letting her work outside the home. He even helped her find the career that would suit her abilities. Dora was fluent in 3 languages apart from Turkish. She attended history and archaeology courses for guide interpreters. My father even attended some of the courses with her to provide her moral support, as she hadn't been to school in many years and felt insecure. Dora became a guide interpreter to tourists. She was often given multi-language buses and was very popular with the tourists. This was a very rewarding career for her and improved her confidence. Winter was the quiet season for tourism. Meantime, my father had become the lawyer for Iberia Airlines and could get free flights, so my parents often came to visit me at university in the winter. Dora's younger daughter, Rina, married in 1977 in Istanbul, and I married in 1986 in Boston. The first grandchild arrived in 1980. Dora was a very excited and loving grandmother, but also somewhat interfering. She worried something bad might happen to the babies, heat stroke, infections, etc., and was pushy about having the babies protected. She also read copiously about health and nutrition and tried to make sure the whole family was well informed and using her advice. Dora and Errol gradually retired in their 60s. After 30 years of smoking, my father had developed emphysema. He quit smoking at 57, which somewhat slowed the disease, but it never went away. Dora said they would never reach their 50th anniversary, so she decided to celebrate the 40th. In 1991, she told me that if I wanted to see my father alive, I had better come home to see him. She was right, of course, and I was grateful for the warning. Though my mother sounded detached and realistic in her predictions, she was truly distraught when my father collapsed with a heart attack at 68. It took her nearly 2 years to pull herself together and take care of the health issues she had neglected while caring for my father in his last year. After this time, Dora began to travel more frequently. Each year, she would spend 3 or 4 months with me in Vancouver, 3 months with my Aunt Jeanette in New Jersey, and the rest of the time in Istanbul. Once in New Jersey, a kitchen chair on casters slipped from under her and she broke her hip. It turned out she had had bad osteoporosis and took nearly 8 months to recover. After that, she was physically more fragile and cautious. She walked with a cane and always had some pain. But she still had her cheerful and energetic personality. She loved classical music, concerts, and movies. She had good friends in Istanbul, Vancouver, and New Jersey, and loved to socialize. She loved to read, especially French historical adventure novels by Alexandre Dumas. She sometimes stayed up all night to finish an exciting story. Dora was especially close to her granddaughter Maggie and had a lot of fun spending time with her. They cooked, read books together, practiced foreign languages, and laughed a lot. She was also proud to witness Maggie's wedding in Vancouver in December 2000. In September 2005, while visiting in Vancouver, Dora suffered a slipped disc in her vertebrae. She was in severe pain. She consulted several doctors, but the condition was inoperable because of her bad osteoporosis. So she decided to return to Istanbul, where home care would be more easily available. I visited my mother in the summer of 2006. She was mainly homebound and hardly left her apartment. The constant back pain was taking a severe toll on her, but she was still able to enjoy her music, TV, and family and friends. Dora passed away after a severe heart attack on March 6, 2007. Her younger daughter, Rina, was with her.
Well, Cheryl, you read this beautifully.
Yeah.
Thanks for that.
Really beautiful, Cheryl.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm glad to hear that, Rita. I
Rita,
started to cry at the end.
Sorry?
What are your reactions, Cheryl? Share them if you want.
I don't know. There's something about reading this story as if it was me. I was saying I got married. I got really sad at the end when my mom died. My
Yeah,
mom
right.
has not passed, but I think some of the Jewish stuff really resonates with me. There were some descriptions in your story, Rita, of Dora and Dora's mother that, whew,
Oh, yeah.
very familiar to me. So yeah, thank you for the opportunity to share your story.
Okay, thank you.
Rita, I have one question for you before the Q&A, and I know this night is getting long, but we have one more story to get to, which is if you had one thing to say to your mother now, what would you say to her?
I don't know. I wish we had talked more. I wish I had gotten more of her stories and stuff. I mean, we talked quite a bit, but it's not the same as if you're thinking that, you want to remember some of her stories for later kind of thing, to let the younger generation know, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So I would have loved that. That would have been good. I mean, I would have loved to know how my parents met. I don't know. I never knew that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I knew a lot of incidents from their courtship, but I never knew how they met.
Yeah,
So,
that's totally fair. Yeah, what the origin story was. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're gonna get to our Q&A in just a moment, Rita. So we'll say goodbye to you for the short term, and we're gonna bring Rebecca back into the space and Kristy into the space. So Rebecca's gonna read Kristy's story, and Kristy, is there anything that you would like to share about your engagement with the workshop and your process before we jump into your story?
It gave me discipline. I am a writer, but in the last year, I've been trying to write my grandma's story, and I just struggled with it. So I think just having a routine to and hearing other people's stories kind of gave me time to mull over everything. And it was a great, it's going to be I think it's going to be a novel or a novella, but yeah.
So you got future plans already for this?
It's already changed since this version. So, and I just want to say my grandma's picture is my background today. My grandma and my papa are standing in their front yard.
And why did you choose to write your grandmother's story as opposed to your mother's story?
Because I'm my grandma. I'm exactly my grandma. If everybody's going north, I go south.
Right.
Because I don't want to listen to anybody. And that's my grandma. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, I look forward to hearing this one. It's our last story of the night, and then folks who want to stick around and have a little chit chat with the writers, we'll make some space for that. So let's give Rebecca the stage and have a nice listen, everyone.
Pearl of Woodbrook, Grief, Glamour, and Grit. Zebdiah Pearl Mudine Hafiz wanted to be free. It had been her all-consuming desire, perhaps from the moment she'd entered the world on September 20th, 1927. On the bed beside her, she heard Nyla's voice, more breath than sound. Go, Mommy. Go to Pa and Ma, Mooney and Dulcie. Go. Suddenly, she was 5 and running lickety-split through their backyard in Woodbrook, leaving her 7-year-old sister Dulcie dangling and terrified from a branch of the mango tree where Pearl had dared her to climb. She wanted to be free. Then, she was 10 and pedaling fast as she could in the opposite direction of Tranquility Primary School, where fear of teachers turned sweat cold and sour under her uniform shirt. Down Rosalino, past Carlos, Alfredo, Anna, Petra, and Alberto, streets and avenues named for the Ziegert family of Angostura fame, past rows and rows of two-story houses with gingerbread trim and lace curtains. She arrowed for Tagarit Road and Queen's Park Oval, where more than one cricketer would give her the sweet eye. Maybe she would catch the Oval boys practicing pan underneath the breadfruit tree in front of the Manette house. She wanted to be free. She was 14 and burning with typhoid fever, clammy with sweat, wrung dry from weeks of diarrhea. She was 15, out of school to take care of Pa, her handsome Pa, carnation milk skin turned pasty white, lying in his bed, unable to move after falling off a ship at work. Pa's education had landed him as civil engineer with the colonial authorities in Trinidad. Pa had showed them all, the hoity-toity white people, that colored people could build upstairs houses in Willbrook too. No way them white people and Syrians with money allowed just any coolie or Creole to move into their neighborhood. This was Woodbrook, with paved sidewalks and electric streetlights that turned on like magic when it got dark. Go, Mummy, Nyla soothed, and Pearl knew she must be tossing and turning, trying to be free of the horrible memory of watching Pa suffer for 10 long years. She wanted to be free. She was 50 and working as a cashier at the Globe Cinema. Uncle Noor had told her the stories of her father, the great Haji Gokul Mi, how he'd come to Trinidad as a baby with his parents in the 1850s, how he'd worked the cane fields under white plantation owners and eventually saved enough money to buy his own shop in 1878. By 1892, he had owned most of the estates in the Diego Martin Valley. In 1933, Gokul had built the largest cinema in the Caribbean at the corner of St. Vincent and Park Streets. In that air-conditioned space, packed with 1,000 people from balcony to pit, Pearl fancied herself a brown Princess Margaret, finger wave curls and all. She wanted to be free. She was 20 and 8 months pregnant with Nyla, just as the future Queen Elizabeth II was getting married and the press was making a fuss over Princess Margaret's social activities. Pearl was struggling to adjust to married life. Not that she had never wanted to get married, but she always hoped it would be when she was good and ready. She'd been following in her Uncle Noor's entrepreneurial footsteps, selling embroidered baby clothes to high-end Woodbrook shops, and excelling so fast at hairdressing, they had her training girls. Every bride in Trinidad wanted Pearl to do their hair and makeup. Pa and Ma and Dulcie had decided it was her turn to be a bride. Go to Daddy, Nyla was saying, and Pearl wondered if she was calling Hafiz's name. Hafiz Abdullah Muhammad, come from a long line of devout Muslim brothers who had decided to use their first names as their last to distinguish themselves. And so she had traded Mudin for Hafiz as her last name in 1947. The same year, Muni got pregnant by a man who didn't want her, had the baby, then killed herself. She wanted to be free. If Dulcie was the good daughter, she the stubborn one, Pearl supposed Muni, born 2 years after Pearl, had been the lost one. Had everyone been too preoccupied taking care of Pa to notice Muni going off track? Had Ma and Pa, after Kamral was born in 1931, devoted all of their attention to their one and only son? Had Pearl herself been too busy wanting to be free, to be a good wife? Hafiz was a good man, a humble man, a tolerant man. Pearl had given him 3 children, Nyla in 1947, Naeem in 1949, and the apple of his parents' eye to this day, Azim, in 1955. How all her white customers crooned over Azim, even when one day when he was about 3, he swaggered into her salon with a cutlass and mouthful of cuss words. She wanted to be free. She was 30 and in New York City for the very first time, had left Ma to cook for Hafiz, left Naila in charge of Naeem and Azim. She borrowed a page out of Princess Margaret's book and went north when everyone told her to stay south. She donned her best fur and primped her hair and joined the students at the Charles of the Ritz, studying hair and makeup, hobnobbing with the Fifth Avenue socialites. Every white university lecturer and their friends flocked to her salon after that. By the time Naila turned 15, their bungalow at the corner of Clifford Street and the southern main road in Carep was a massive upstairs house with terrazzo floors, polished cantilevers, and plush carpet. Pearl's salon, where she did hair, makeup, and facials, occupied the entire bottom floor. On Sundays, Pearl would sit at the large, oval mahogany dining table Kamral had made her and arrange her profits in neat bundles. She wanted to be free. She was 54 and a grandmother of 3. Azim had married a white girl with green eyes and given Pearl a handsome grandson, Nasser. Naila had married Clive, a man who would never really like Hafiz, but who adored Pearl, and Pearl adored him. Their daughter, Chrissy, was sick as a baby, and it was Pearl who accompanied Clive to Canada for her medical procedures. Naila had Pearl's second grandson, Rayad, during one of their absences. Naeem had married Sonia, a Woodbrook girl, and had given her a third grandson, Adil. Thick as thieves, those 3 boys were. Naila was still telling her to go to Pa, go to Hafiz. Pearl could hear Hafiz reading evening namaz, like he had done for 25 years as Imam of the St. Joseph Mosque. She had never missed a day of fasting during Ramadan, and always did her part as the Imam's wife, even as she traveled to Miami and Caracas, sourcing jewelry to coordinate with the outfits and painted t-shirts her customers never stopped requesting. She wanted to be free. She was 78 and lying in this very bed with Hafiz. She didn't know if he could hear her or even see her, but she lay with him, tried to still the hand that tore at the feeding tube in his nose. Too late. It was too late to apologize now for how she'd always been too rough with him. Too late to say the words that never felt right between them. I love you. She heard those 3 simple words from Naila now. Did they know she loved them? Pa and Ma and Mooney, Dulcie and Kamral, Naila, Naeem and Azim, her grandchildren and great-grandchildren. Yes, she had great-grandchildren, although she couldn't remember their names. Life had seemed to slow to a thin stream, then a trickle after Hafiz had died. She had ceased to be the sequin dancer everyone had sworn was 55 at her 75th birthday party. She had tried her best to put on a good show, to smile, to small talk. But she wanted to be free. Pearl climbed onto her bicycle and pedaled in the direction of Woodbrook. In no time at all, it seemed, she was riding those familiar streets, Carlos, Alfreda, Anna, Petro, Alberto. She heard herself singing along in a clear soprano to Mario Lanza on a radio playing somewhere. And then she saw Pa and Ma, Dulcie and Mooney chatting in the square like they had no cares in the world. Hafiz was there too, one foot nudging a rocking chair into lazy motion as he read the Quran in his lap. Cow heel soup and roast beef jostled for supremacy in the hot tropical air. And at St. Teresa's, choir voices rose and fell in multi-part harmonies. Just over a month shy of her 92nd birthday, Zobdiah Pearl Hafiz was finally, eternally free.
Thank you, Rebecca. That was a beautiful read. All right, Kristy. Yeah, finally.
Thank you, Rebecca. That was beautiful.
What does it feel like to have your story read out loud?
It's really good hearing someone who's not connected to the story read it. I have to admit, so I had my boyfriend's mom read it, and obviously she's just used to reading to her grandkids, so it sounded like my grandma was a Care Bear. It was like, Pearl wanted to be free. She was walking one day in the forest, and I'm like, no, wrong tone. I mean, cute and everything, but yeah, it sounded like grandma was a Care Bear. So yeah.
So this is a very different read.
It is a very different read. I adore my grandma. And yeah, I wanted this to be her story, not what anybody else thought. I mean, similar to maybe when everybody was doing their family research, you know, oh, don't say anything bad about grandma, or grandma was too ambitious, too greedy, you know, and I'm like, I don't think so. I think she was doing her thing, right? And she wanted to be free. That was exactly what it was. Mm-hmm. You know, her father, like Pa, was paralyzed at 32 years old, and he died at 42. Like, I can't imagine that. So I think it just drove her, and her sister died at 18, like committed suicide at 18. So I think those things drove her to just make the most of life. Mm-hmm. And I think I'm just like her. Like, live every moment, right?
Live every moment. I think that's valuable words. I'm going to bring in all of the writers. Any of the writers who want to be a part of the Q&A, I would love for you to just turn your cameras on, and we'll spotlight as many of you as we can get in the square. Marilyn as well is going to join us. And I'll throw some questions in the space, but I also want to go to our audience to see if they have any thoughts.
Spotlighted your video for everyone.
Thoughts or questions or comments that you want to share with our
The host has spotlighted your video for everyone.
We have a hand already from Megan. So let's take Megan's question or comment, and then we'll keep going. Go ahead, Megan.
That was amazing. Thank you so much for that.
Like, the host has spotlighted your video for everyone.
For Nancy, what part of India did you go to, and what temple did your mom go to? Because my mom went to India as well, so I'm just wondering.
We'll give Nancy a moment to try and unmute.
Audio on Zoom.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Audio.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question. Sorry about that, Megan. Can you?
I love the story that you wrote. It was amazing. So your mom was from India. What
left.
I guess in the Punjab area. What temple did you go to, and did your mom go to? And what part of India was the Punjab area? What city was that? Chennai or?
Well,
Kathy Butler left.
I'm going to say Hashapur is my mom's village, but there's many little villages there, AF4, but the villages are in their streets. So there's always the temple outside your door. There are other houses, there's temples. So there's many temples. I don't know what the names are, but yes, when I went there, as soon as I wake up there, walk across the street, there's the temple. Next door, there's temples, probably 3 temples in each block.
Wow. What temple? Like Hindu temple or Sikh temples?
The Sikh temple. She's a Sikh. Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool. Okay. Thank you so much. I just gotta get
Yeah,
ready
my
for
mom-
dinner.
my
But
mom-
thank you so much.
My mom passed away in January 30th, 2022. Sorry, I didn't put that. 2020. Sorry, I should have said that.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, have a good evening, and thank you so much, everybody.
Andrew Thompson left.
Okay, we're gonna go to Lori, and then we're gonna go to Louise.
Dickinson Smith left.
Wait a minute.
Audio now unmuted.
First, I want to say all these stories were just wonderful, and everything, made me think a lot of my mom with a lot of these stories that were read tonight, because I lost her 7 years ago. So I still miss her to this day, and everything. So a lot of the stories about smoking and at young age and everything really made me think of my mom, because she started doing that when she was at the age of 13 and stuff. So but I'm like one of these people, I don't know how my parents met and stuff. I don't know how they met each other back in the 50s. So that's one thing I don't know about my parents and everything. But I think we all took a lot of guts to write these stories.
Lori, does it inspire you to want to write your
Rebecca
stories?
I don't know. It gives me some thoughts. I would definitely. I think when I spend time with my siblings in September, might be something that we talk about and everything. When we're all together, because my older sister did a she has a book of a lot of our family history in it. So, I definitely would want to talk to her about it, since she's got a lot of the family history, and my younger sister has a lot of my father's history from when he was in the motion picture business. So I would definitely want to talk to them and say, can we do something, or write something about our parents, and everything.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that, Lori.
You're welcome.
We're going to go to Louise, and then we have somebody with a phone number, but we'll check in with them in a moment. So Louise, you're up.
Hi, everyone. Every story hit my heart tonight. It's just hearing others' stories and some of the struggles and growing up pains and growing up different things. But Eric, I want to thank you especially. The way you wrote yours was just, it hit a harder spot in me to open up some of the pain I was feeling. So, and if I ever write my mom's story, it will be after she's gone. I will never write it when she's alive, because I know she'll never appreciate it. And I have to do it when she's gone. That's when I'll do it. I might be over next year's asking her questions.
Yeah, that's right. Ask her the questions, Louise.
But what I'm saying is I will not do it until she's gone. I will respect my mom's privacy. And I will not maybe use her name. I might have to try and figure a way of doing it without using her name. I don't know. Because my mom is so private of a woman. And if I did that to her, I know I'd scar her and hurt her very deeply. So I have to do it a different way. And I understand that. And I sometimes we have to respect our parents' wishes too. But just hearing you guys' stories tonight helped me. And I thank each and every one of you. As I said, Eric, thank you. Extra special. Because the fact that you were the only gentleman who read a story here tonight, but the story hit because you wrote it. I feel in a way that coming from a man, sharing the story is even, most men can't share that kind of story the same as a woman can. So I really appreciate that. You reminded me that my father could do the same. So thank you.
Thanks, Louise.
Here's hoping you get many more memories with your mom, Louise, before it's time to write her story.
Yes.
Okay, we have a phone number here, and so I don't know who is next in line, but I bet you they know who they are.
Yes, it's probably me. Can you hear me?
Can hear you. Who is me?
Yes, it's Doris Belusik from Victoria, and I was listening to all the stories, and I just wanted to quickly say that I really enjoyed listening to them all, and they were all very moving. And yeah, I just wanted to say that I was present, listening, and just thoroughly enjoyed hearing them all. So just wanted to say that.
Does it make you want to write your mother's story?
I have thought about it in the past. I've partially written about my father, but I have thought about writing, my parents' stories. They're not, neither of them are alive anymore. So it's, I have things I could say, but of course I've got things I wish I had asked, back in the days when they were here. So, but yeah, you never know. I just may.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. I enjoyed it. Thank you all.
We've got a hand from Wendy. Wendy, a moment to unmute. Yeah. Oh, we gotcha.
Marilyn knows my story. It took me, it'll be 4 years on the 21st of May that my mom passed away. And I approached her 2 years prior to that about this story that I wanted to write, but I needed her to answer some questions. And she never did. So when I was going through her stuff, I had, Marilyn's 100 questions that were still blank in the same envelope that I had mailed her. But all that to say, yeah, it took me a while to kind of put together what I have so far, and I will definitely review it. But yeah, it really helped me understand my relationship with my mom too, on another level. And I would encourage, people, regardless of how reluctant you might be, just hang in there. And thanks, Marilyn.
Thanks, Wendy, for that. Yeah, I guess that's a great question for the writers, because I know that, Anne, you talked a lot about wanting this to be healing for you, and I wonder if anybody else was looking for that as well in part of this journey. And I think you can heal even if your mom is still alive. Anybody else looking for something like that? If you weren't looking for that specifically, the question is, what were you looking for in writing this story about your mother or your grandmother?
I think I was looking for it to celebrate and to find and to be confident in my own identity, because culturally I'm going against it and often feel I'm not a good Indian girl, but then I look at my grandma's story and she managed to be both. So I think I found courage in that, just to keep doing what I'm doing.
Does it make you want to explore culture more, Kristy, or are you just like, you know what, this is who I am and I make no apologies for that?
Yes, I think I just make no apologies for it. I think the thing with growing up in Woodbrook, and what I will expand on when I get the bigger story, Woodbrook was a place where basically you had to be British respectability or get out. And what people in Woodbrook did was they took that and they empowered themselves. And I think there's a lot about my culture that keeps especially people with disabilities down. And I think I have to move away from that and be comfortable with saying, you know what, if that's a part of my culture, I can't honor. Like, I just have to put that away.
Voiceover off.
That colonized lens.
Well, in this case, colonization actually gave me my independence because it was the brown people that didn't want to let me in school.
Voiceover on.
So,
Soon.
and it's grandma's white customer that allowed me to take her test. And I passed it. I got and ended up in school. So, yeah. So,
Rita, you have something to add? What were you looking for?
Yeah, I wanted to say to Kristy, actually, I wanted to sort of put down good memories of my mom and just a comprehensive story. But Kristy, your story is so lyrical. It's just amazing the way that you wrote it.
Thank you.
You know, I was really impressed by, you know, when I heard that. It's just amazing. So.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Kristy?
Yeah, Nancy, we can hear you.
Oh, Kristy, your story, everyone's story was wonderful. I did this because I wanted to recognize my mom, even though she couldn't work and, you know, being East Indian, men do all the work and mom sits home. I want to acknowledge my mom for things that she did for us. And she now has grandchildren, great grandchildren, and she's all missed out this. And, you know, it makes me feel that listening to your guys' story touched my heart because every story is different and everyone had a story about their mom. And it makes me feel so special today because, you know, I acknowledge my mom and I hope she realized that, I did this for her because I wanted to tell her how much I love her and that she's been recognized, right? And I can put more to the story now when listening to everyone's story. Now, next story is going to be bigger and it's going to be 2,000 words.
I wanted to say, Nancy, it was great. Thank you for letting me work with you or reaching out and not being discouraged and letting me help you put your memories into words. I have all the Zoom recordings, so I can help you add to your story. But yeah, it was a pleasure working through that with you. And I can throw that out to anyone who, because I am a writer and I'm a teacher, and I have to actually go teach a student in Hong Kong in about 10 minutes. So, but throwing out there, people want, a writing coach. I'm here.
That's a wonderful offer, Kristy.
Thank you for reading my story. It was wonderful. And thank you, Kristy, for having this opportunity for someone that needed and struggled, and you helped me get this out of me. And now it's done. Thank you.
Awesome.
We've got a hand from Tilo, so let's bring Tilo in and see what his thoughts or questions are for the group.
Hello. I enjoyed all these stories that everybody had wrote, and off and on through the years, I've thought about my mom about throughout her life and things. One of the things that got me to start thinking about my mom and her life was about my stepfather. He was an alcoholic, and I had read a book about families and alcoholism and all the pitfalls and everything that families do and stuff, and what to do with an alcoholic, when they don't want to acknowledge that they're an alcoholic and that. And through that book, I got to think about my mom, about her life and that, because for a while I was angry at her for staying with him for so long, because mentally I was abused from that. But since I've gotten older in that, and I have found some things about my mom, some things I'm questioning. She's definitely got a dark past and some past that she doesn't want to any of us children to know. But some of us have found out some things in the past that it paints a different picture from what I thought about my mom. So we wonder, how much do we really know about this person who helped raise us inside? Because I saw my mom as a mom when I was growing up until I got a little older. And then when she was going through her dementia, and that I saw her as a person and not just a mother, a person struggling with illness and trying to make things sense for her. So I think that I was there for my mom at the end of her life, and I did not ignore things from her and that. So I'm very grateful from her, because I've always had a place to sleep, and I've always had food in my mouth, and that we did have some hard times, but nothing but some of the people I've heard, and I found out that they had to sleep in cars and stuff like this, and stuff like that. So I'm very, very grateful for that, and for the love she gave me, and to give all of her 10 children.
Wow.
as much as she could. And then on top of that, after all her children were grown, she helped the community becoming a home support worker, and she was almost like a home nurse, because she worked after the dying and abused children, all the hard cases, and she gave so much to, not to her children, but to society. So thank you everyone for writing this. It would take me a lot to do some research about my mom, putting dates and stuff like this, because back then there were no dates written down.
Well, and that's a great point, Tilo, because I started by asking Marilyn at the beginning, like, what if you don't know this stuff, right? What if you don't have family that you can access or resources?
Well,
how can we best honor our mothers when we document them, or our
yeah, my mom wanted a record of her and her family, but when she finally got the record from some Indian chief that she found, the record said girl born 1926, boy born 1925 or something like that, died. No name, no last name, nothing.
Yeah.
So she really doesn't know anything about her grandparents. That's in the story itself, but
yeah,
she was on her own since she was 12, and it was...
That's a story I want to hear, Tilo.
Well,
Start
I
thinking
really
about
have
it.
to think about that one.
Yeah. So Marilyn, how, again, when you're in a situation like Tilo is, how do you take those first steps?
Well, as Tilo just said, that's a story in itself. What we're talking about is stories. It's the stories that we knew. It's the stories that we grew up with. It's not the definitive statement on a person. You don't have to know the answers. And as I've said to everyone here, sometimes a question in your story is more evocative than having the answer. We say, I don't know this. Why don't I know it? I don't know what happened. The story about, yes, the records say a girl, a boy, and a lot of the time the girls weren't even registered in history. That says something.
Right.
That says something about the world where your mom grew up. That is how much value was put onto the girls, that they weren't even registered. Well, we are making those people visible now. We are making them as a fully three-dimensional. And I'm so thrilled with all of the work that these writers did, like all of the rewrites. What cool rewrites you guys have been putting into your stories. Oh my God, I didn't know that. It's so wonderful. But what we were trying to get, what we were talking about, was seeing these as three-dimensional people. Yeah, she got mad. She did this, she did that. And the story of redemption is always possible. The story of reconciliation is always possible. But you gotta write the hard times in order to see the bad times, the good times. You know, it's not a flat picture. a lot of people are very shy about talking about their mothers because that's an indoor story. Their dad is outside and mom is inside. Well, we've lost women's history. We've lost and not given value to what our mothers did do because we haven't been talking about it.
Right.
Marilyn, I want to thank you
yes,
for being so wonderful as a mentor and always wanting to hear my story and being patient when I said I wasn't ready to share it.
Oh,
so
Kristy, what a great story.
Hope you liked it.
We'll talk. Yeah. Yeah.
It's not 2,000 words, but I have 20,000 words. So I do have to go, but
right,
thank you everyone for sharing your stories. It was wonderful listening. And as I say, I'm always here for any writing help or whatever people need. And yeah, have a great night, everybody.
Thanks, Kristy.
Thank you.
I would love to give each of the writers just one last opportunity to say anything you'd like to say to Marilyn or to say anything you'd like to say
about Kristy Kassie left.
about your process and writing the stories. So why don't we start with you, Nancy? What are your last words before we all say goodbye tonight? And we have a prize draw to get to. We will do that.
I want to say thank you, Marilyn, for allowing this to happen. You know, we did 4 weeks and the next week, you know, like I just heard your story and, you know, my mom never drank. My dad did the drinking. My mom cooked for him. And I always think, wow, my mom catered to my dad all this many years. And look at, wow, my mom covered her head when her grandfather-in-law came over for respect. And look at the nice things my mom did. And thank you for allowing us to read this story out loud today. And you put your effort in, even though you're on holiday, you got to see us. We enjoyed it. I can't wait to do this next year. Add more to my story. Thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Kerry, you're next on my screen. How about for you? What are your final parting thoughts?
Yeah, as I said, I found it hard to write about my mom specifically, but I'm glad I did. And so I'm thankful to VocalEye for putting on this workshop, and to Marilyn. Yes, everything that you offered to each of us was so gracious of you to share your knowledge from the years of doing these pieces and working with people. So I just wanted to thank everybody for all of that, because yeah, I'm glad I could just honor my mother, because I'm so proud of her. So I just wanted to have a place to do that, and so thanks for offering that.
Honor her and continue to honor her, right? Yes. Eric, you're next on my screen, my friend. What thoughts have you got about this process? Any thoughts of encouragement for other people to write their stories? Come on out to the next workshop.
Yeah, I'm quite pleased with the process, and I would like to say, Tilo, I'm looking forward to you telling more of your story. You're very interesting to listen to many times, so I'm sure that you can do it, and I'm sure that you could get some help from your wife there. Anyway, I also think it is history. It's a different way to write history, and my mother really carried the torch in terms of all of the family stories and all of the family relatives of my dad's family. He didn't say squat about people, but she had all his relatives enumerated, and who might have been a little bit different, and maybe for some reason or other died when he was 32, or like the very interesting stories and trails she'd find. So I think really women's stories ever since Cleopatra have been really missing the proper due that they're really worth. And I thank you, Marilyn, and I can hope to continue working on my piece.
Great, thanks, Eric. Anne, how about for you? Have you got some last words of wisdom or healing or encouragement for others?
my last thoughts. When I started this, and when I was writing my mom's story, and I was looking at her life, I was thinking, what was the point of her life? Because it ended so quickly. But honestly, like with workshops, they were kind of like counseling sessions. So I really appreciate that. Thank you, Marilyn. Thank you, everybody. So it's been really helpful. But what I have realized, I have now understand the point of her life. And what I did get from her is how to deal with adversity, especially through the vision loss, how to deal with the adversity, resilience, and how to make a positive impact in the world. So that is something that I carry with me and I take with me. And being able to write this is been able to give me a way to honor her and a way to give a tribute to her. So I'm very thankful for this opportunity.
Well, Rita, what about you, my friend? What are your last parting thoughts?
Okay, well, I really appreciated the workshops. I, both from Marilyn's experience and the advice that she gave people, and also from people sharing their mother's stories when they read, parts of their stories as we were going along in the workshops, and just the opportunity to talk about our mothers a little bit, before, like for me, before I actually wrote some of the things, it helped me clarify my thinking, to be able to talk about the special things about my mom. So thank you.
That's really lovely. I really enjoyed this evening and spending time with you all in this space. We had a lot of content and we're a little long on time, but folks have hung in there. So thanks everybody for your patience, especially those who are dialing in from tomorrow now. Like Kerry, it's tomorrow for you. So we appreciate that. But before we say an official goodbye to you all, we do have a prize draw that I would like to invite Marilyn to do with us. And so Sarah's just going to be a voice hovering in the background. But Sarah's got the names of all of our participants in a bag. And Sarah and Marilyn, I'm going to let you do this thing.
Okay, so Marilyn, just say a word whenever and I will stop.
Now.
Okay. Oh. Lori Van Allen. You're still.
Oh, it's Lori. Congratulations, Lori.
You are now unmuted. Thank you.
You're welcome. We're going to mail you a CD of the music from Old Stock, which is a fantastic play. I think you're really going to like it. Talk about storytelling. It's a storytelling musical, but I think you're going to really like it.
Oh, sounds lovely.
Yeah, so we'll get that to you.
Oh,
Friends, it's been a real pleasure having you in the space. Big thank you to Cheryl Green and Rebecca Singh, our readers.
VocalEye, vocaleye.ca. Special thanks to our funders, the Canada Council for the Arts, the British Columbia Arts Council, the Province of British Columbia, and the City of Vancouver.